Security, remove this man and his child immediately. Vanessa Park's voice cut through the marble lobby like a blade. 8-year-old Lily Ward clutched her father's calloused hand tighter, her pale face still bearing traces of exhaustion from her morning treatment. Caleb Ward stood motionless in his dusty work boots, surrounded by polished floors and polished people who looked at him like he was dirt they'd accidentally tracked in. What none of them knew, what would soon turn this moment into the most humiliating day of Vanessa's career, was that the man she was throwing out held more money in this bank than everyone in that lobby combined. I invite you to follow my story to the very end. If it moves you, please hit that like button and comment the city you're watching from. I'd love to see just how far this story travels. The morning sun cast long shadows across Millbrook's financial district as Caleb Ward pulled his 12-year-old pickup truck into the parking garage beneath First Heritage Bank. The truck looked out of place among the BMWs and Mercedes sedans that filled the executive level, but Caleb had stopped caring about appearances a long time ago. What mattered was the small figure buckled into the passenger seat beside him. "Daddy, my tummy feels funny," Lily said, her voice thin and tired. Caleb killed the engine and turned to face his daughter. At 8 years old, she should have been bursting with energy, racing through playgrounds, giggling with friends. Instead, she sat wrapped in an oversized cardigan, despite the warm September weather, her skin carrying that particular pallor that came from too many hours under fluorescent hospital lights. "I know, sweetheart." He reached over and brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "The medicine does that sometimes. But remember what Dr. Chen said? It means it's working." "It doesn't feel like it's working," Lily whispered. Caleb's heart clenched. 3 years of treatments, 3 years of watching his little girl fight a battle no child should have to fight. 3 years of early morning hospital visits, late-night emergencies, and prayers sent to whoever might be listening in the universe. "Tell you what," he said, forcing lightness into his voice. "We just need to run in here real quick, 5 minutes, tops. And then I'm taking you for the biggest ice cream sundae you've ever seen. Deal?" A small smile flickered across Lily's face. "With sprinkles?" "With sprinkles, hot fudge, whipped cream, and one of those little cherry things on top." "2 cherries?" "You drive a hard bargain, kid." Caleb grinned. "2 cherries it is." He helped her out of the truck, steadying her when she wobbled slightly. The parking garage smelled of concrete and exhaust, and their footsteps echoed as they walked toward the elevator. Caleb caught their reflection in the polished metal doors. A 34-year-old man in worn jeans, steel-toed boots, and a faded flannel shirt, holding hands with a little girl who looked like she might blow away in a strong wind. They didn't look like they belonged here. Caleb knew that. He'd known it the moment he'd decided to come to the main branch instead of the smaller one across town. But he needed to check the balance on the legacy account, and that particular account could only be accessed at First Heritage's flagship location. The elevator deposited them in the lobby, and Caleb felt Lily's hand tighten around his. "It's so big," she whispered. She wasn't wrong. The First Heritage Bank main branch occupied the ground floor of a 20-story building that had dominated Millbrook's skyline for over a century. Marble floors stretched in every direction, polished to such a shine that Caleb could see his reflection looking back up at him. Crystal chandeliers hung from 30-foot ceilings, and the teller stations were arranged like altars at the far end, staffed by men and women in suits that probably cost more than Caleb's truck. The lobby was busy for a Tuesday morning. Business people in expensive clothes hurried between stations, their shoes clicking importantly against the marble. A few customers sat in plush leather chairs near the windows, sipping complimentary coffee while they waited for private consultations. Caleb led Lily toward the nearest teller station, where a young man in a crisp white shirt and burgundy tie was helping an elderly woman with a deposit. They waited patiently, Lily leaning against Caleb's leg, her energy already depleted from the morning's treatment. "Next, please," the teller called, and Caleb stepped forward. "Hi there." Caleb offered a friendly smile. "I just need to check the balance on an account. Should only take a second." The teller, his nameplate read Marcus Webb, looked Caleb up and down. His expression remained professionally neutral, but something shifted behind his eyes. A judgment. An assessment. "Of course, sir. Do you have your account number?" "Yeah, right here." Caleb pulled a worn leather wallet from his back pocket and extracted a small card. It's a legacy account, set up about 40 years ago. Marcus took the card, his eyebrows rising slightly as he examined it. I see. And you have identification? Caleb handed over his driver's license. Marcus studied it, then looked at the card again, then back at Caleb. His fingers hesitated over the keyboard. Is there a problem? Caleb asked. No, sir. Just one moment, please. Marcus stepped away from his station and walked toward a glass-walled office in the corner of the lobby. Through the windows, Caleb could see a woman seated behind a large desk, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Caleb's monthly grocery budget, and her expression suggested she'd never smiled a day in her life. Daddy, I'm tired, Lily murmured. Can we sit down? In just a minute, honey. They're just checking something. Caleb watched as Marcus spoke to the woman in the office. She listened, her eyes narrowing, then turned to look through the glass directly at Caleb and Lily. Something in her gaze made Caleb's stomach tighten. The woman stood. She was tall, maybe 5'8", with the kind of posture that suggested years of expensive finishing schools, and followed Marcus out of the office. She walked with the confident click of designer heels, her eyes never leaving Caleb as she approached. Good morning. Her voice was smooth, polished, and cold. I'm Vanessa Park, branch manager. I understand you're inquiring about an account. That's right, just need a quick balance check. Vanessa's eyes flicked down to Caleb's boots, then to his flannel shirt, then to Lily, who had pressed herself against her father's leg. Her lip curled almost imperceptibly. I see. And you're the account holder? It's a legacy account, set up by my grandfather, passed down through my father, now held in trust for my family. Vanessa examined the card Marcus had handed her. And do you have documentation proving your relationship to the original account holder? Perhaps some paperwork from your attorney? The way she said attorney suggested she doubted Caleb knew what the word meant. I have my ID, the account information. That's what I've always used. Mr. Ward, Vanessa's smile was thin and sharp. You have to understand, we can't simply access sensitive financial information for anyone who walks in off the street. There are protocols, procedures. I'm sure you can appreciate that. Caleb felt the first flicker of irritation. I've been coming to this bank for years. Never had a problem before. Perhaps at one of our community branches. Vanessa gestured vaguely toward the door. We have a location on 5th Street that might be better suited to your needs. They're more equipped to handle certain types of customers. Certain types of customers. The words hung in the air between them. Around the lobby, Caleb noticed that several people had stopped what they were doing to watch. A man in a 3-piece suit smirked into his coffee cup. 2 women near the window whispered to each other, their eyes darting between Caleb and Vanessa with undisguised amusement. Daddy? Lily tugged at his hand. Can we go? In a minute, sweetheart. Caleb's voice was calm, but his jaw had tightened. Ms. Park, I'm not asking for a loan or trying to open a new account. I'm a customer of this bank. My family has been a customer of this bank for longer than this building has been standing. All I need is a balance check. It'll take 30 seconds. Vanessa's expression hardened. Mr. Ward, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Excuse me. This is a place of business, not a... She paused, and that thin smile returned. Not a shelter. We have clients here who expect a certain atmosphere, a certain standard. Her eyes dropped meaningfully to Caleb's work boots. I'm sure you understand. Something cold settled in Caleb's chest. He'd dealt with prejudice before. You didn't grow up working class in a town like Millbrook without learning early that some people measured your worth by the labels on your clothes. But this was different. This woman wasn't just looking down on him. She was looking at him like he was something she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. Ms. Park, Caleb kept his voice steady. My daughter and I came here straight from the hospital. She's in the middle of treatment for a serious medical condition, and I promised her ice cream after we finished this one quick errand. We're not here to cause trouble. We're not here to bother anyone. We're here because I need to check an account balance. For a moment, something flickered across Vanessa's face. It might have been shame, it might have been guilt, but it was gone so quickly that Caleb wondered if he'd imagined it. "I'm sorry to hear about your daughter's health," Vanessa said, though her tone suggested she was anything but sorry. "However, my responsibility is to our clients, and right now, you're causing a disruption. I'm standing here quietly asking for basic customer service. How is that a disruption?" "Your very presence is a disruption, Mr. Ward." Vanessa's voice rose slightly, and Caleb realized she wanted the lobby to hear, wanted them to see her defending the sanctity of their precious bank against the interloper in work boots. This branch serves high-value clients who expect discretion, professionalism, and a certain caliber of experience. If you're unable to provide documentation proving your claim to this account, then I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to leave, immediately. Lily pressed closer to Caleb's leg. He could feel her trembling. "It's okay, honey," he murmured. Then, louder, "Ms. Park, I've provided my identification and my account information. That's all that should be required. I'll be the judge of what's required in my branch." "Your branch?" Caleb's eyebrow rose. "According to the plaques on the wall, this bank was founded by the Hollis family in 1892. I don't see any Parks listed." A flush crept up Vanessa's neck. "The Hollis family hasn't been involved in day-to-day operations for decades. This branch is my responsibility, and I will not have it turned into what?" Caleb's voice was quiet, but carried across the suddenly silent lobby. "A place where actual customers are treated with basic human dignity? Where a man can bring his sick daughter to check on his own money without being treated like a criminal?" Vanessa's eyes flashed. She was losing control of the narrative, and she knew it. Around them, the smirking faces had begun to shift. Some of the watchers looked uncomfortable now. Others exchanged uncertain glances. "Mr. Ward, I'm going to call security." "Go ahead." The simple response seemed to throw her. Vanessa had expected arguments, threats, maybe even violence. She'd expected him to slink away with his tail between his legs, like she assumed he always did. But Caleb just stood there, one hand holding Lily's, the other hanging relaxed at his side. "I said go ahead," he repeated. "Call security. Have them escort me out. And while you're at it, make sure someone records it. Because I have a feeling the Hollis family might be interested to know how their flagship branch treats customers whose families helped build this city." Something shifted in the air. Vanessa's composure cracked slightly. "What are you talking about?" "Ward." Caleb let the name hang in the air. "My name is Caleb Ward. My father was Marcus Ward. My grandfather was Thomas Ward." He watched her face, waiting for the recognition that didn't come. "No? Those names don't mean anything to you? What about Ward Construction? Ward Ironworks? The company that laid the foundation for half the buildings in this financial district, including the one we're standing in right now?" Vanessa's flush deepened. "I don't know what you're trying to—" "The granite in this floor was quarried by my great-great-grandfather's crew in 1889. The iron beams in these walls were forged by Ward Ironworks in 1890. This bank, this building that you're so proud to manage, exists because men in work boots just like these spent 18 months of their lives making sure it would stand for 100 years. Caleb's voice remained calm, but something burning had entered his eyes. "So please, Ms. Park, tell me again about what kind of customer belongs in your lobby." The silence that followed was absolute. Every eye in the room was fixed on Caleb now, the man in work boots who suddenly seemed to fill the space in a way that had nothing to do with physical size. Vanessa opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, a new voice cut through the tension. "Caleb? Caleb Ward?" An elderly man had emerged from the private elevator at the far end of the lobby. He was in his late 70s, perhaps early 80s, with a full head of silver hair and the kind of expensive suit that whispered rather than shouted about its price tag. But it was his face that Caleb recognized, older now, more lined, but unmistakable. "Mr. Hollis," Caleb said. Grant Hollis, chairman emeritus of First Heritage Bank, crossed the marble floor with a stride that defied his years. His eyes were fixed on Caleb with an expression of genuine warmth that seemed almost startling in this cold, polished space. "Good Lord, son." Grant reached Caleb and clasped his hand in both of his own. "I haven't seen you since your father's funeral. That was what, 3 years ago now?" Almost 4, sir. Time flies. Grant's eyes softened with old grief. Marcus was one of the finest men I ever knew. We served on the city planning board together for 15 years. Lost one of the few honest voices in this town when he passed. His gaze dropped to Lily. And who's this young lady? This is my daughter, Lily. Caleb gently nudged her forward. Lily, this is Mr. Hollis. He was a friend of your grandfather's. Lily looked up at the elderly man with tired but curious eyes. Hi, she said softly. Grant bent down to her level, his joints creaking slightly. Hello there, Miss Lily. Has anyone told you that you have your grandfather's eyes? He had the same color, like honey in sunlight. I always told him it was his best feature. A small smile crossed Lily's pale face. Really? Really? Your grandfather was a very handsome man. Not as handsome as me, of course, but nobody's perfect. Lily giggled, a sound that had been too rare lately. Caleb felt something loosen in his chest, but the moment was interrupted by Vanessa, who had composed herself enough to step forward. Mr. Hollis. Her voice had transformed completely, warm now, deferential, practically dripping with professional charm. I didn't realize you were in the building today. I would have… Vanessa. Grant straightened, and his voice carried a different kind of weight now. What exactly is happening here? Just a routine matter, sir. This gentleman, Grant cut her off, is Caleb Ward. His family built half of this city, including this bank. His father was my friend, my colleague, and one of the most generous philanthropists this community has ever known. And his grandfather established one of the oldest legacy accounts in our entire institution. Grant's eyes were cold now, fixed on Vanessa with undisguised displeasure. So I'll ask again, what exactly is happening here? Vanessa's composure crumbled. I was simply following protocol. He didn't have proper documentation, and Protocol? Grant's voice rose slightly. I just watched you tell a loyal customer and his sick child that their presence was a disruption. I heard you suggest he go to one of our community branches as if he wasn't good enough to stand on this marble. Is that your idea of protocol? Sir, I didn't know who he… That's precisely the point, Vanessa. Grant stepped closer to her, and despite the 5-inch difference in their heights, she seemed to shrink. You didn't know. You looked at this man. You looked at his clothes and his boots and his daughter, and you decided you knew exactly who he was. You decided he didn't belong here. You decided he didn't deserve to be treated with basic human dignity. I was protecting the interests of the bank. The interests of the bank? Grant's voice dropped to a dangerous quiet. Let me tell you something about the interests of this bank. This bank was founded by my great-grandfather on a simple principle, that every customer, regardless of their station, deserves to be treated with respect. That principle built an institution that has survived 2 world wars, the Great Depression, and 3 separate financial crises. And it did so because people trusted us. Because they knew that when they walked through those doors, they would be seen as people, not as spreadsheets, not as assets, not as potential liabilities to be managed. Grant turned to the young teller who had been watching the entire exchange with wide eyes. Marcus, isn't it? Yes, sir, the young man stammered. Pull up Mr. Ward's account. Marcus looked at Vanessa, then back at Grant. Sir, that wasn't a request. Marcus's fingers flew over his keyboard. After a moment, his face went pale. Grant nodded. Read it out loud. Sir? Marcus looked like he might be sick. Read the account balance. Let everyone here understand exactly who Ms. Park was preparing to throw out of this bank. The lobby had gone utterly silent. Every customer, every employee, every person in that grand marble space was watching, waiting. Marcus swallowed hard. Primary checking account, $2,347,212. He paused, then continued in a voice that cracked slightly. Legacy Trust Fund, $47,200,000. Scholarship Endowment Fund, $12,800,000. The numbers hung in the air like physical objects. Caleb watched the faces around him transform, shock, disbelief, horrified realization. The man in the three-piece suit who had smirked into his coffee cup was now staring at the floor. The two women by the window had stopped whispering entirely. Vanessa had gone white. $62 million, Grant said quietly. Give or take, that's how much money you were about to throw out of this bank, Vanessa. He turned to face the lobby, at large. But here's the thing, and I want everyone to hear this, because it matters more than any number on any account. He walked to the center of the room, his voice carrying to every corner. If Caleb Ward had walked in here with $3 to his name, it would have been just as wrong. If he had nothing in his pockets but lint and hope, he would still deserve to be treated like a human being. That's not about money. That's not about status. That's about basic, fundamental decency. Grant returned to stand beside Caleb. Vanessa, you're fired. Mr. Hollis, Vanessa's voice was strangled. Effective immediately. Clean out your office and wait. The word came from Caleb, and it surprised everyone, including Caleb himself. Grant turned to look at him. Caleb? Caleb looked down at Lily, who was watching everything with those honey-colored eyes that Grant had said reminded him of her grandfather. Then he looked at Vanessa, this woman who had humiliated him, who had made his sick daughter feel unwelcome, who represented everything he despised about the way some people move through the world. Can I talk to you for a moment, Mr. Hollis? Privately? Grant studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Of course. They stepped aside near the windows overlooking the street. Lily stayed close, her hand still wrapped around Caleb's. You want to know why I'd ask for mercy for someone who showed me none? Caleb said. It wasn't a question. The thought crossed my mind. Caleb knelt down so he was eye level with Lily. Sweetheart, do you remember what Mommy used to say about being strong? Lily's face softened at the mention of her mother. She said being strong isn't about being mean to people who are mean to you. That's right. What else did she say? Lily thought for a moment. She said real strength is when you can choose to be kind even when it's hard, even when people don't deserve it. And do you think Mommy was right about that? Lily nodded slowly. I think so. Caleb stood back up and faced Grant. My wife died 2 years ago. Cancer. She was the kindest person I've ever known, and she spent her whole life believing that everyone deserves a chance to be better. She worked with kids in the juvenile justice system, kids that everyone else had given up on. She'd tell me that writing someone off is easy, but helping them find their way back to being good, that's the hard work. That's where the real change happens. He looked back at Vanessa, who was standing motionless in the center of the lobby, surrounded by the wreckage of her career. What Ms. Park did today was wrong. It was cruel and it was petty and it hurt my daughter's feelings. But if I stand here and demand her head on a platter, what does Lily learn? That vengeance is strength? That power means crushing people when you have the chance? Caleb shook his head. My wife wouldn't want that. And honestly, neither do I. Grant was quiet for a long moment. What would you suggest? Let her face what she did. Not in some abstract way, not a termination letter she can explain away to herself later. Make her confront it. Make her apologize to everyone she's ever treated the way she treated me today. Make her work in one of those community branches she was so quick to dismiss, so she can learn that the people who walk through those doors deserve the same respect as anyone in this lobby. That's unorthodox. That's mercy, Mr. Hollis. Real mercy. Not the kind that lets someone off the hook, but the kind that gives them a chance to actually become better. It's a lot harder than revenge, and honestly, I think it's a lot more effective. Grant looked at Caleb with an expression that was hard to read. Finally, he nodded slowly. Your father would be proud of you, son. And your wife, wherever she is, I think she'd be proud too. Caleb felt his throat tighten. Thank you, sir. They walked back to where Vanessa was standing. Her composure had completely shattered now. Tears were streaming down her face, and her hands were shaking. Ms. Park, Grant said, and his voice had lost some of its edge. Mr. Ward has asked me not to fire you. Vanessa's head snapped up, disbelief written across her features. Instead, you're being transferred immediately to our branch on 5th Street, the one you suggested would be better suited to Mr. Ward's needs. You'll work there for the next 12 months. Your title will be senior teller, not manager. And before you begin that assignment, You will personally apologize to every customer you've treated poorly during your time here. I want letters. I want phone calls. I want face-to-face conversations. Do I make myself clear?" Vanessa opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. Yes, sir." "And Vanessa?" Grant's voice softened slightly. "This is a gift. A chance to learn something that most people never figure out, that the measure of a person isn't in their bank account or their wardrobe. It's in how they treat people who can't do anything for them. Don't waste it." Vanessa nodded, unable to speak. Then she turned to Caleb. "Mr. Ward, She stopped, swallowed, started again. "What I said to you, what I assumed about you, it was inexcusable. I've spent so long in this environment that I forgot. I forgot that people are more than numbers on a screen, more than their appearance." Her eyes dropped to Lily. "And I especially apologize to your daughter. She didn't deserve to witness that. No child should ever be made to feel unwelcome." Caleb nodded slowly. "I appreciate that, Ms. Park, and I hope you'll remember this moment, not because of what I have in my account, but because of what it cost you to forget that everyone has a story you don't know." The lobby began to stir back to life. The tension that had filled the space was dissipating, replaced by something more uncertain. Reflection, perhaps. Caleb noticed several of the customers avoiding eye contact with him, shame written in their body language. "Mr. Ward," Grant touched his arm, "would you allow me to buy you and your daughter lunch? I'd like to hear more about what you've been doing these past few years, and I have some things I'd like to discuss with you about the bank, about some changes I've been wanting to make for a long time." Caleb looked at Lily, who was practically swaying with exhaustion. "I appreciate that, Mr. Hollis, but I promised this one ice cream, and I think she's about at her limit for the day." "Of course," Grant nodded with understanding. "Perhaps another time? Soon?" "I'd like that." Grant reached into his jacket and produced a card. "My direct line. Call any time." He bent down to Lily's level once more. "And Miss Lily? I hope you feel better soon. The world needs more brave young ladies like you." Lily managed a tired smile. "Thank you. I liked your stories about Grandpa. I have many more. Next time I'll tell you about the time he saved my life during a thunderstorm when we were working on the riverfront project. Very dramatic. You'll love it." Caleb took Lily's hand and guided her toward the exit. As they passed through the lobby, he noticed something strange. People were looking at him differently now, not with judgment or dismissal, but with something that might have been respect, or maybe shame, or both. One of the women who had been whispering earlier stepped forward. "Mr. Ward, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for how this all happened, and I hope your daughter's treatment goes well." Caleb nodded. "Thank you." Others followed, murmured apologies, well wishes for Lily, the kind of basic human decency that should have been there from the beginning. Caleb accepted them all with grace, though inside he felt a complicated mix of vindication and sadness. It shouldn't have taken $62 million for people to see him as worthy of kindness. They stepped out into the September sunshine, and Lily squinted up at the sky. "Daddy?" "Yeah, sweetheart." "That was really weird." Caleb laughed. A genuine laugh that surprised him. Yeah, it really was. "But that old man was nice, and I liked when you told that lady about how our family helped build things. I didn't know we did that. There's a lot of family history I haven't told you yet. Your great-great-great-grandfather came to this country with nothing but the clothes on his back and a dream. He learned to work with stone and iron, and he built something that lasted. Every generation since has tried to honor that, to build things that matter, to help people who need it." They reached the truck, and Caleb helped Lily into her seat. Her eyelids were already drooping. "Daddy?" "Mommy would have been proud of you today, for being nice to that lady even though she was mean." Caleb's throat tightened. He fastened Lily's seatbelt and smoothed her hair back from her forehead. "You think so?" "I know so. She always said that's the hardest thing, being good when people are bad. And you did it." Lily's eyes closed. "That makes you a superhero." Caleb stood there for a long moment, his hand resting on his daughter's cheek. The weight of the morning pressed down on him. The humiliation, The confrontation, the revelation, and the mercy that had cost him more than anyone watching would ever know. It would have been so easy to let Vanessa burn, to stand by and watch her lose everything the way she'd tried to take everything from him. But Sarah wouldn't have wanted that, and Lily was watching, always watching. "I'm no superhero, sweetheart," he whispered. "I'm just trying to be the dad you deserve." Lily didn't respond. She'd already fallen asleep. Caleb closed the door gently and walked around to the driver's side. As he climbed in and started the engine, his phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Grant Hollis. "When you're ready, I'd like to talk about something. The bank needs to change, and I think you might be the person to help make that happen. But first, take care of your daughter. Everything else can wait." Caleb read the message twice, then set his phone down. Through the windshield, he could see the First Heritage Bank building rising against the sky, the building his ancestors had helped construct, the institution that had nearly thrown him out like garbage. Things were going to change. He could feel it. But right now he had a more important mission. He put the truck in gear and headed for the ice cream shop. 2 cherries, he'd promised. 2 cherries it would be. The ice cream shop was called Scoops and Dreams, and it had been a Millbrook institution since 1947. Caleb remembered coming here as a kid with his own father, sitting in the same red vinyl booths, ordering the same impossibly large sundaes that no human being could actually finish. Lily perked up as they walked through the door, the bells jingling overhead, the sweet smell of waffle cones filling the air. She was still tired, still pale, but there was a light in her eyes that hadn't been there an hour ago. "Can I really get anything I want?" she asked. "Within reason, no sundaes bigger than your head." "What if I find one exactly as big as my head?" "Then we negotiate." They settled into a booth near the window, and Caleb watched his daughter study the menu with the intensity of a scholar examining ancient texts. This was what mattered, not the $62 million sitting in accounts he rarely touched, not the confrontation in the bank lobby, not the complicated feeling swirling through his chest. This. Lily. Ice cream. The simple moments that made up a life. "I've decided," Lily announced, "I want the unicorn spectacular. It has rainbow sprinkles and a cotton candy cloud on top." Sounds very practical. "It also has 2 cherries, so we don't even have to ask." "Deal." The waitress came by, a teenage girl with bright pink hair and a nose ring, and took their order with genuine warmth that felt like a balm after the morning's coldness. Caleb ordered a simple vanilla cone for himself. He'd lost his appetite somewhere between Vanessa Park's sneer and Grant Hollis's revelation. "Daddy?" Lily traced a pattern on the table with her finger. "Why did that lady think we didn't belong there?" Caleb had been dreading this question. "Well, sweetheart, some people make assumptions about others based on how they look, what they wear, what kind of car they drive. But that's silly. You can't tell what someone's like just by looking at them." "I know, but sometimes people forget that. They get so used to judging books by their covers that they forget to actually read the story inside." Lily considered this. "So she thought because your boots were dirty and our truck is old, we must not have any money? Something like that? But we do have money. Lots of it. We do. So why do we have an old truck? Why don't we live in a big fancy house?" Caleb smiled. This was a conversation he'd been meaning to have for a while now. "Do you remember what Mommy used to say about our money? She said it wasn't really ours. It was like we were borrowing it?" "No, that's not right." Lily scrunched up her face, trying to remember. "She said we were stewards?" "Stewards. It means we take care of the money, but it's not really for us. It's for helping people." "What kind of people?" "All kinds." Caleb leaned forward. "That big number the man read at the bank? Most of it goes to help people who are sick, like you. It pays for their treatments when they can't afford it. And the scholarship fund. That helps kids go to college who wouldn't be able to otherwise. And the trust fund. That's set aside for big projects that help the whole community." "Like building stuff? Like great-great-great-grandpa?" "Exactly like that. The Wards have always believed that when you have more than you need, you build a longer table, not a higher fence. You share what you have. You lift people up." The waitress arrived with their ice cream. Lily's unicorn spectacular really was as tall as her head, and for a few minutes the conversation paused while they dug in. "Daddy?" Lily spoke around a mouthful of rainbow sprinkles. "I'm glad you didn't let that man fire the mean lady." "Yeah?" "She was really mean, but—" Lily paused, thinking hard. Maybe she didn't have anyone to teach her about tables and fences. Maybe she just needs to learn. Caleb felt his heart squeeze. Sometimes Lily sounded so much like Sarah that it physically hurt. "That's very wise, sweetheart, and you might be right. Sometimes people are mean because they're scared or hurt or because nobody ever showed them a better way to be." "Do you think she'll learn?" "I hope so. That's why I asked Mr. Hollis to give her another chance. Not because she deserved it, but because everyone deserves a chance to be better." Lily nodded solemnly, then returned her attention to the cotton candy cloud on top of her sundae. Caleb watched her eat, marveling at the resilience of children. She'd been through more in her 8 years than most people experienced in a lifetime. Losing her mother, battling illness, enduring treatments that would break most adults. And yet here she was, finding joy in rainbow sprinkles and asking wise questions about forgiveness. Sarah would have been so proud. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Grant Hollis. "I've been thinking about what you said, about mercy being harder than revenge, about giving people chances to become better. That's what this bank used to stand for before it forgot. I want to remember, and I think you can help." Caleb read the message and set his phone aside. There would be time to think about Grant's offer later. Time to consider what it would mean to get involved with the bank, to try to change something so massive from the inside. But not today. Today, he was just a dad eating ice cream with his daughter, a man in dusty boots and a worn flannel shirt, sitting in a vinyl booth, watching his little girl battle a sundae bigger than her head. That was enough. That was everything. "Daddy?" "Yeah, sweetheart?" "I can't finish this," Caleb laughed. "We can take it to go." "But the cotton candy will melt." "Then I guess we'd better eat faster." Lily grinned. A real, full-wattage grin that made everything worthwhile, and dove back into her sundae with renewed determination. Outside the window, the sun was shining on Millbrook's streets, on the buildings that Ward hands had helped construct, on a world that was complicated and cruel and beautiful all at once. Things were going to change. Caleb could feel it in his bones. But first, ice cream. First always, Lily. The rest could wait. 3 days after the incident at First Heritage Bank, Caleb found himself standing outside the hospital room where Lily was receiving her weekly treatment, his phone pressed to his ear. "I appreciate the call, Mr. Hollis, but I'm not sure I'm the right person for what you're describing." "Grant. Please, call me Grant." The old man's voice crackled through the speaker with warmth that belied his age. "And I disagree. You're exactly the right person. What you did in that lobby, the way you handled yourself, the mercy you showed, that's precisely what this institution needs." Caleb watched through the window as a nurse adjusted Lily's IV line. His daughter was reading a book about dragons, her lips moving slightly as she sounded out the harder words. Even hooked up to machines that pumped medicine through her veins, she found ways to escape into other worlds. "My daughter's surgery is in 3 weeks, Caleb said. "That's where my focus needs to be." "Of course. I would never ask you to compromise that, but perhaps after. When Lily's on the mend?" "I'm not a banker, Grant. I'm a carpenter. I build things with my hands. And I'm asking you to help me build something different, something better." Grant paused. "Your father understood this, Caleb. He knew that money is just a tool. What matters is what you build with it, and more importantly, who you include in the building." Through the window, Lily looked up from her book and caught Caleb's eye. She waved, and he waved back, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Can I think about it?" "Take all the time you need." "But Caleb, I'm 83 years old. I've spent the last decade watching everything my family built become something cold and transactional. Before I die, I'd like to see it become human again. You might be my last chance for that." The call ended, and Caleb stood there for a long moment staring at his phone. The weight of Grant's words settled over him like a heavy coat. The door to Lily's room opened, and Dr. Chen stepped out. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a perpetually tired expression that came from too many years of delivering bad news to good people. "Mr. Ward, do you have a moment?" Caleb's stomach dropped. "Is something wrong?" "Let's talk in my office." They walked in silence through the hospital corridors, past rooms filled with other families fighting other battles. Caleb had spent so much time in this building over the past 3 years that he knew every crack in the linoleum, every flickering light, every squeak of every door. Dr. Chen's office was small and cluttered with medical journals and family photos. She gestured for Caleb to sit, then took her own seat behind the desk. "I want to talk to you about Lily's surgery," she began. "Is there a problem with the date?" "No, the date is fine. October 15th, as scheduled." "Doctor." Chen folded her hands on the desk. "I want to make sure you understand what we're facing." Caleb nodded slowly. "You've explained the procedure, the risks." "I have, but I'm not sure I've been clear enough about what success looks like." She pulled up something on her computer, turning the monitor so Caleb could see. "Lily's condition has been stable for the past 6 months, which is good, but stable isn't the same as improving. The surgery we're proposing is aggressive. It's our best chance at giving her a normal life, but it's also significant. You're saying it's dangerous. I'm saying it's a calculated risk. The success rate for this particular procedure is about 72%. And the other 28%? Dr. Chen met his eyes. Complications, some manageable, some less so. Caleb felt the world narrow to a point. 72%, nearly 3 in 4. Those were good odds, weren't they? Better than a coin flip, better than a lot of things. But that meant there was more than 1 in 4 chance that something would go wrong. "What would you do?" he asked quietly. "If she were your daughter?" Dr. Chen was silent for a long moment. "I would do exactly what you're doing. I would weigh the options, consider the risks, and ultimately make the decision that gives her the best chance at a full life." She leaned forward. "Mr. Ward, without this surgery, Lily's condition will continue to limit her. She'll never be able to run and play like other children. She'll spend her life in and out of hospitals, managing symptoms instead of living. The surgery is risky, yes, but not having it carries its own risks." Caleb nodded. He'd known all of this already, had run through these same calculations 1,000 times in the dark hours of the night. But hearing it from Dr. Chen made it real in a way that his own thoughts never quite achieved. "We'll do it," he said. "The surgery, we'll do it. I know you will." "Doctor," Chen's expression softened slightly. "And Caleb? I've been doing this for 20 years. I've seen a lot of parents in your position. The ones whose children do best are the ones who stay strong. Not by pretending everything is fine, but by being present, by being there. Lily's going to need you in the weeks ahead. Don't forget to take care of yourself so you can take care of her." Caleb stood and shook her hand. "Thank you, Dr. Chen, for everything." He walked back to Lily's room, his mind churning. 28%, 1 in 4. He pushed the numbers away, focusing instead on what he could control. Being there for his daughter, making sure she had everything she needed, filling whatever time they had with as much joy as possible. When he opened the door, Lily looked up from her book with a smile that made everything else fade into background noise. "Daddy, the dragon just saved the princess, but plot twist, the princess didn't need saving. She was actually a dragon too, in disguise." "That does sound like a plot twist." Caleb settled into the chair beside her bed. "How are you feeling?" "Tired, but okay." She set the book aside. "Dr. Chen talked to you, didn't she?" Caleb blinked. "How did you know?" "She always talks to you after my treatments, and you always come back looking worried." Lily reached over and patted his hand. "It's okay, Daddy. I'm going to be fine." "I know you are, sweetheart. I mean it." Her voice was serious now, more adult than any 8-year-old should be. "I've been thinking about it a lot. About the surgery, and I'm not scared." "You're not?" "Well, maybe a little. But Mommy always said that being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing the thing anyway." She squeezed his hand. "I'm going to be brave, and then I'm going to get better, and then we're going to go to Disneyland." Caleb laughed despite himself. "Disneyland, huh? You promised. When I got better, you said we'd go." "I did say that." He'd said it 2 years ago, in the dark depths of Lily's first major crisis, when promises of future adventures were all he had to offer. An award never breaks a promise. "Exactly," Lily nodded with satisfaction. "So I'm going to get better, and we're going to go on Space Mountain, and I'm going to eat so many churros that I explode." Let's maybe not explode. Fine. I'll eat exactly the right amount of churros to not explode. The nurse came in then to check Lily's vitals, and Caleb stepped back to give her room to work. Through the window, he could see other families in the hallway, parents with the same shell-shocked expressions he knew he wore, children with the same brave smiles that masked their fear. This was the world he lived in now, a world of hospitals and treatments, of statistics and survival rates, of hope that felt as fragile as spun glass. But it was also a world of dragon books and Disneyland promises, of rainbow sprinkles and cotton candy clouds. He would take the good with the bad. He would be present, like Dr. Chen said. He would be strong. For Lily. Always for Lily. The next morning, Caleb returned to the job site where he'd been working before the bank incident. The Morrison renovation was a beautiful old Victorian that had been neglected for decades, and Caleb's crew was slowly bringing it back to life. He loved this kind of work, the satisfaction of seeing something broken become whole again, the tangible evidence of progress at the end of each day. Jake Morrison, the homeowner and a longtime friend, met him at the door with a grin. Look who decided to show up. Heard you've been busy causing scenes at fancy banks. Caleb groaned. How did you hear about that? Are you kidding? It's all over town. Caleb Ward, secret millionaire, put snooty bank manager in her place. Jake laughed. You should see the comments on the Millbrook Facebook group. You're practically a folk hero. I didn't do anything heroic. I just wanted to check my account balance. While looking like you just came from a construction site in a bank full of suits. Jake shook his head admiringly. The ball's on you, man. They walked through the house together, Jake pointing out the progress that had been made in Caleb's absence. The original hardwood floors had been refinished, the water-damaged ceiling in the living room had been replaced, and the crew was currently working on the kitchen cabinets. You didn't have to come in today, you know, Jake said as they inspected the crown molding in the dining room. With everything going on with Lily, nobody would blame you for taking time off. Work helps, Caleb admitted. Keeps my hands busy while my mind tries to figure out how to survive the next 3 weeks. Jake nodded. He'd known Caleb since high school, had stood beside him at his wedding and again at Sarah's funeral. If anyone understood what Caleb was going through, it was Jake. How's she doing? Lily, I mean. She's incredible. Caleb ran his hand along a piece of restored trim, feeling the grain of the wood beneath his fingers. Braver than I am, honestly. She's got this surgery coming up that scares the hell out of me, and she's already making plans for Disneyland after. Kids are resilient like that. They bounce back from things that would flatten adults. That's what everyone says. But sometimes I look at her, and I see everything she's been through written on her face, and I think, how is that fair? How is it fair that an 8-year-old has to be that resilient? Jake was quiet for a moment. It's not fair, it's never fair. But fair doesn't matter, does it? All that matters is what you do with what you're given. Caleb nodded slowly. It was the same thing Sarah used to say, in different words. The universe doesn't owe us fairness. It just gives us chances to be good despite the unfairness. So what about this bank thing? Jake asked, changing the subject. I heard the old chairman wants you to get involved somehow? Grant Hollis. Yeah, he's got some idea about me helping to change the bank's culture, make it more human, I guess. And you're considering it? I don't know. Caleb picked up a piece of sandpaper and began working on a rough spot in the molding, more for something to do with his hands than because it needed doing. It feels like trying to move a mountain with a spoon. These institutions, they're so big, so set in their ways. What difference could one person make? What difference did one person make in that lobby? Caleb stopped sanding and looked at Jake. I'm just saying, Jake continued, you walked in there looking like a regular guy, and you ended up changing everything. Not because of the money, though that certainly got their attention, but because of who you are, how you handled it. The way you showed mercy when you could have shown revenge. He shrugged. Maybe that's exactly what they need. Someone who understands that people matter more than profits. Since when did you become a philosopher? Since my wife made me read that book about servant leadership. Couldn't sleep for a week, but damned if it didn't change how I think about things. Jake grinned. Point is, maybe you're exactly the spoon that Mountain needs. Caleb returned to sanding, but his mind was elsewhere. Grant's offer, Jake's words, Sarah's voice echoing from somewhere in his memory. telling him that the world needed people who were willing to do the hard work of making things better. That evening, after putting Lily to bed in her room full of dragon posters and fairy lights, Caleb sat in the kitchen with a glass of whiskey and his father's old leather journal. The journal had been a fixture of his childhood. He remembered his father writing in it every night, recording the day's work, the projects completed, the lessons learned. After Marcus Ward died, Caleb had inherited it along with everything else. He'd read through it several times, marveling at the wisdom contained in those weathered pages. Tonight, he was looking for something specific, a passage his father had written decades ago, when the family business was facing its own moment of crisis. He found it near the middle of the journal, the handwriting cramped but legible. "We had a choice today. We could have walked away from the Henderson project, cut our losses, let someone else deal with the complications. Would have been the smart business decision. But Thomas Ward didn't teach me to make smart business decisions. He taught me to make right decisions. So we stayed. We fixed what was broken. We lost money but gained something more valuable. The knowledge that when things got hard, we didn't run. A Ward builds. A Ward endures. A Ward leaves things better than he found them." Caleb read the passage twice, then closed the journal and stared out the window at the darkness beyond. A Ward builds. A Ward endures. A Ward leaves things better than he found them. The words felt like a summons, a calling. He picked up his phone and scrolled to Grant Hollis's contact. "Grant, it's Caleb Ward. I've been thinking about your offer." "And?" "I'm not saying yes, not yet, but I'm not saying no either. After Lily's surgery, when she's on the mend, let's talk, really talk, about what you're envisioning and how I might fit into it." The relief in Grant's voice was palpable. "That's all I ask. And Caleb, whatever happens with the bank, whatever you decide, know that you've already made a difference. What you did in that lobby, the example you set, people are still talking about it, still thinking about it. That kind of thing has a way of rippling outward. I hope you're right. I usually am. It's one of the benefits of being old. You've made so many mistakes that eventually you learn what works." After they hung up, Caleb sat in the quiet kitchen, thinking about ripples and mountains and spoons, about legacies and promises and the mysterious ways that one moment in a bank lobby might change the trajectory of an entire institution. Outside, the moon was rising over Millbrook, casting silver light on the streets that Ward hands had helped build. Somewhere in this city, Vanessa Park was preparing for her first day at the 5th Street branch, facing the consequences of her cruelty. Somewhere, Grant Hollis was dreaming of a bank that treated every customer like a human being. And here, in this kitchen, Caleb was trying to figure out how to be a father, a legacy, and possibly a force for change, all at once. It was too much to think about. So he finished his whiskey, checked on Lily one more time. She was sleeping peacefully, her dragon book clutched to her chest, and went to bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, new opportunities to build something that mattered. But tonight, he just needed to rest. The 2 weeks before Lily's surgery passed in a blur of preparations and appointments. Caleb found himself operating on autopilot, going through the motions of daily life while his mind circled endlessly around the same set of fears. Dr. Chen had scheduled a final consultation 3 days before the procedure, and Caleb brought Lily to the hospital early in the morning, both of them quiet during the drive. The autumn leaves were changing color now, painting Millbrook in shades of gold and crimson that seemed almost obscenely beautiful given the circumstances. "Daddy?" Lily's voice broke the silence. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." "When Mommy went to the hospital for the last time, did she know she wasn't coming home?" Caleb's hands tightened on the steering wheel. They'd talked about Sarah's death before, many times, but Lily had never asked this particular question. "I think she suspected," he said carefully, "but she never said so. She didn't want us to be sad when we still had time together." "Was that lying?" "No, baby. That was love. Sometimes love means protecting the people you care about from truths that would only hurt them." Lily was quiet for a moment. "I'm not going to die, Daddy." "I know." "No, I mean it." She turned to look at him, her eyes fierce. "I've decided. I'm going to live, and I'm going to get better. And I'm going to go to Disneyland and eat exactly the right number of churros. I've decided. Caleb pulled into the hospital parking lot and stopped the truck. He turned to face his daughter, this tiny warrior who had already survived so much. "Lily Ward," he said, "you are the bravest person I know. Braver than Grandpa? Way braver than Grandpa. Braver than you? Infinitely braver than me." She smiled, a real smile that lit up her whole face. "Good, because you need someone to show you how it's done." Dr. Chen's consultation was thorough and detailed. She walked them through every step of the procedure, answering Caleb's questions with patience and Lily's questions with warmth. By the end, Caleb felt as prepared as he was ever going to feel, which was to say, not very prepared at all. "Is there anything else you need?" Dr. Chen asked as they were leaving. "Anything I can do to help you get through these next few days?" Caleb shook his head. "Just take care of my girl when the time comes. That I can promise." The night before the surgery, Caleb couldn't sleep. He wandered through the house in the darkness, past photos of Sarah smiling from the walls, past Lily's room where she slept peacefully, past his father's old workshop in the garage where tools hung in neat rows, waiting for hands that would never use them again. He ended up in the backyard, sitting on the porch swing that Sarah had insisted they install during their first year in the house. She'd loved to sit out here on summer evenings, watching fireflies dance across the lawn while Lily chased them with a mason jar. "I don't know how to do this," Caleb whispered to the darkness. "I don't know how to let her go into that operating room and just wait, not knowing if she's okay, not being able to protect her." The darkness didn't answer, but somewhere in his memory he heard Sarah's voice. "You don't have to know how. You just have to show up. You just have to be there. That's what love is. Showing up, over and over, even when it breaks your heart." "I miss you," he said. "Every day. Every hour. I miss you so much it feels like there's a hole in my chest where you used to be." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the smell of autumn and change. "But I'm going to be there for her. I'm going to show up. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever comes after, I'm going to be the father she needs." He sat there until the first light of dawn began to color the eastern sky, then went inside to wake Lily for the biggest day of their lives. The morning of the surgery was cold and gray, clouds gathering on the horizon like worried thoughts. Caleb dressed Lily in her favorite purple sweater and helped her into the truck, both of them silent as they drove through streets that were just beginning to stir with early commuters. "Daddy?" Lily's voice was small. "I changed my mind. I'm a little scared now." Caleb pulled the truck to the side of the road and turned to face her. "That's okay, sweetheart. Being scared is normal. Even brave people get scared. Even you? Especially me. I'm terrified right now." Her eyes widened. "You are?" "Of course I am. You're my whole world, Lily. The thought of anything happening to you." He had to stop, swallow hard, push down the emotions that threatened to overwhelm him. "But here's the thing. We're going to walk into that hospital together. We're going to hold hands, and we're going to trust Dr. Chen and her team to take care of you. And then, when you wake up, I'll be right there. First thing you see, I promise." "Pinky promise?" Caleb extended his pinky finger, and Lily wrapped her smaller one around it. "Pinky promise." They drove the rest of the way in silence, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not fearful, but resolute. Two wards facing down the impossible, the way wards always had. The hospital was buzzing with activity when they arrived. Nurses in scrubs hurried past with clipboards and IV bags. Families clustered in waiting rooms, wearing the same expressions of anxious hope that Caleb knew he was wearing. Dr. Chen met them at the surgical wing, her usual tired expression replaced by something focused and determined. "Good morning, Lily. Are you ready to be the bravest patient I've ever had?" "I'm ready," Lily said, and her voice barely shook at all. They wheeled her into pre-op, and Caleb held her hand the entire way, not letting go until the very last moment when the doors closed between them. And then the waiting began. Caleb found a seat in the surgical waiting room, a sterile space with uncomfortable chairs and year-old magazines. Other families were scattered around, an elderly couple holding hands, a young mother bouncing a toddler on her knee, a man in a business suit who kept checking his phone as if the news he was waiting for might arrive by text. Time moved strangely. Minutes stretched into hours, hours compressed into moments. Caleb tried to read a magazine, gave up, tried to pray, found he didn't have the words. He stared at the clock on the wall, watching the second hand make its endless circuit. "Mr. Ward?" He looked up to find a familiar face standing in the doorway. Grant Hollis, dressed in a simple gray suit, his white hair slightly disheveled. "Mr. Hollis, what are you doing here?" The old man settled into the chair beside him with a grunt. "Grant, please. And I'm here because no one should have to wait alone." "How did you even know—" "I have my sources." Grant waved a dismissive hand. "Hospital board members who owe me favors. The point is, I'm here, and I brought reinforcements." Behind him, more figures filed into the waiting room. Marcus Webb, the young teller from the bank, carrying a cardboard tray of coffee cups. Several other bank employees Caleb didn't recognize, all wearing expressions of nervous solidarity. "We wanted to show our support," Marcus said, handing Caleb a cup of coffee. "After what happened at the bank, well, you changed things for a lot of us, made us think about how we treat people." "I don't understand," Caleb said slowly. "You barely know me." Grant leaned back in his chair, a small smile on his weathered face. "That's just it, Caleb. You're not just a name on an account. You're a father, a man who showed extraordinary grace under pressure, a reminder of what matters." He paused. "And in a few weeks, I hope, a partner in changing this institution from the inside out." Caleb looked around at the small crowd that had gathered. Bank employees, yes, but also something more. People who had witnessed a moment that mattered, people who wanted to be part of something better. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. Just let us be here." And so they waited together. Hours passed, coffee cups emptied and were refilled. Stories were shared about Caleb's father, about the history of the Ward family, about the ways that one act of decency could ripple outward into something larger. When the doors to the surgical wing finally opened and Dr. Chen emerged, Caleb's heart stopped. Her face was tired. So tired. But as she got closer, he saw something else in her eyes. Relief. "The surgery was successful," she said, and Caleb felt his knees buckle. Grant's hand was on his arm, steadying him. "There were some complications. Lily's blood pressure dropped during one of the more delicate procedures. But we managed them. She's in recovery now. In a few hours, you can see her." "She's going to be okay?" "Barring any unforeseen complications, yes. I expect her to make a full recovery." Caleb let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for 3 years. Around him, the small crowd erupted in quiet celebration. Handshakes, backpats, the kind of restrained joy that hospitals demanded. "Thank you," Caleb managed to say. "Thank you." Dr. Chen smiled, a real smile, the first he'd ever seen from her. "Thank Lily. She's a fighter. Now go sit down before you fall down. I'll send someone when she's ready for visitors." The next few hours were a blur of exhausted relief. Grant and the others eventually departed, leaving Caleb alone with his thoughts and his gratitude. He called Jake, called his neighbors, called everyone who had asked him to keep them updated. And then, finally, a nurse appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Ward, your daughter is asking for you." He followed her through the labyrinth of hospital corridors, past the beeping monitors and the hushed conversations, until they reached a small room where Lily lay propped up in a bed that seemed far too large for her tiny frame. She was pale, so pale. Tubes and wires connected her to machines that hummed and beeped in an unfamiliar rhythm. But her eyes were open, and when she saw Caleb, she smiled. "Daddy?" Her voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. "I did it." Caleb crossed the room in 2 strides and gathered her carefully in his arms, mindful of the tubes, the wires, the fragility of this moment. "You did it," he confirmed, his voice breaking. "You were so brave, sweetheart. So incredibly brave." "I told you." Her eyes were already closing, exhaustion pulling her toward sleep. "Wards don't break promises." "No, we don't." "Disneyland, Daddy. You promised." "Disneyland," he confirmed. "As soon as you're strong enough. All the churros you can handle." "Good." She snuggled closer to him, her small hand finding his and holding on tight. "I'm going to sleep now. Stay." "I'm not going anywhere," he whispered. "I'm right here, always." Lily's breathing evened out as she slipped into peaceful sleep. Caleb sat beside her, holding her hand, watching her chest rise and fall with each precious breath. Outside the window, the clouds had parted, and afternoon sunlight was streaming through, painting the room in shades of gold. It felt like a sign, like a promise. They'd made it through the darkness. Now it was time to step into the light. Caleb closed his eyes and, for the first time in weeks, felt something like peace settle over him. His daughter was alive. His daughter was going to be okay. Everything else could wait. The days following Lily's surgery blurred together in a haze of hospital routines and small victories. Caleb barely left her side, sleeping in the uncomfortable recliner beside her bed, waking every few hours when nurses came to check vitals and adjust medications. He learned to read the monitors like a second language, finding comfort in the steady rhythm of her heartbeat displayed in glowing green lines across the screen. On the third day, Lily opened her eyes and asked for ice cream. "The doctor says you need to start with clear liquids," Caleb told her, trying to keep a straight face. "Clear liquids are boring." Lily's voice was still weak, but there was a spark in her eyes that hadn't been there for months. "Can ice cream be a clear liquid if it's really melted?" "That's not how science works, sweetheart." "How do you know? Are you a scientist?" Caleb laughed, and the sound surprised him. He couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed like that, full and unreserved. "You're definitely feeling better." Dr. Chen came by that afternoon, her tired face creased with something that looked almost like joy. She examined Lily thoroughly, checking incisions, reviewing charts, asking questions about pain levels and appetite and sleep quality. "I have to say," she told Caleb when she'd finished, "this is one of the best recoveries I've seen from this procedure. Her body is responding remarkably well to the surgery." "Does that mean I can have ice cream?" Lily piped up. Dr. Chen smiled. "Tell you what, if your numbers look good tomorrow, we'll talk about upgrading you to soft foods. And if those go well, ice cream might not be far behind." "Did you hear that, Daddy? Ice cream might not be far behind." "I heard, but first you need to rest." "I've been resting for days. I want to do something." Caleb exchanged a look with Dr. Chen, who shrugged. "A little activity might actually be good for her. Nothing strenuous, obviously, but some gentle movement, maybe a short walk down the hall with supervision, could help with her recovery." That evening, Caleb helped Lily into a wheelchair and pushed her slowly through the pediatric wing. She waved at the nurses like a queen on a parade float, accepting their congratulations and well wishes with grace that seemed almost comical in an 8-year-old. "Daddy, look!" She pointed at a room they were passing. Through the window, Caleb could see a boy about Lily's age, bald from chemotherapy, sitting alone in his bed and staring at the ceiling. "That boy looks sad." "He probably is, sweetheart. Being in the hospital is hard." "Can we say hi?" Caleb hesitated. He didn't know the boy's situation, didn't know if interruptions were welcome. But Lily was already waving through the window, and the boy had turned to look at her with something like curiosity. "Just for a minute," Caleb said. He wheeled Lily into the doorway, and she introduced herself with the confidence of someone who had never met a stranger. "Hi, I'm Lily. I just had surgery. What's your name?" The boy blinked at her for a moment. "Tyler." "That's a good name. Why are you here, Tyler?" "Lily," Caleb said gently. "Maybe that's too personal." "It's okay." Tyler's voice was quiet but steady. "I have leukemia. I've been getting chemo." "Does it hurt?" "Sometimes. Mostly it just makes me tired." Lily nodded seriously. "Being tired is the worst. But you know what helps? Ice cream. I haven't had any yet because my doctor says I need clear liquids first, but soon I'm going to have ice cream and it's going to be amazing." Something flickered across Tyler's face. Not quite a smile, but close. "Ice cream does sound good. When you get out of here, you should go to Scoops and Dreams. It's the best ice cream shop in Millbrook. They have a sundae called the Unicorn Spectacular with rainbow sprinkles and a cotton candy cloud on top." "That sounds made up." "It's totally real. Daddy, tell him it's real." Caleb smiled. "It's real. And it's exactly as ridiculous as it sounds." They stayed for 10 minutes, Lily chattering away about dragons and Disneyland and the relative merits of different ice cream flavors while Tyler listened with growing interest. By the time they left, the boy was almost smiling. "Thank you," Tyler's mother said as Caleb wheeled Lily back toward the door. She'd been sitting in the corner, watching the exchange with tears in her eyes. He hasn't talked to anyone but doctors and nurses in weeks. You have no idea what this means. It wasn't me, Caleb said. It was all her. Lily beamed. Maybe I can come back tomorrow. Tyler and I didn't finish talking about dragons. I think Tyler would like that very much. They returned to Lily's room, and Caleb tucked her back into bed, his heart full in a way that was hard to describe. Even in the midst of her own recovery, his daughter was finding ways to bring light to others. Sarah would have been so proud. Daddy? Lily's voice was sleepy now, the exertion of the outing catching up with her. Yeah, sweetheart? I think I'm going to be okay now. Caleb smoothed the hair back from her forehead. I think so too. And you know what else? What? I think maybe we're supposed to help people, like how Mr. Hollis and the bank people came to help us. Maybe that's what the money is for, not just to have, but to help. Caleb stared at his daughter, struck by the simplicity and profundity of her words. Out of the mouths of babes, as the saying went. I think you might be right, he said. I think that's exactly what it's for. A week later, Lily was discharged from the hospital with a thick folder of follow-up instructions and a prescription for continued rest. Dr. Chen walked them to the lobby, shaking Caleb's hand and bending down to give Lily a gentle hug. You were one of my best patients, she told her. I expect great things from you, Miss Ward. Like going to Disneyland? Exactly like going to Disneyland. Give yourself a few more weeks to heal, and I see no reason why you can't do everything you've been dreaming about. The drive home felt different than all the drives to the hospital had felt. Lighter, somehow. Full of possibility rather than dread. Lily pressed her face to the window, watching the autumn leaves swirl past, her eyes wide with the simple pleasure of being alive and outside and free. Everything looks so pretty, Daddy. Did the world always look this pretty? It's always been this pretty. Sometimes we just forget to notice. When they pulled into the driveway, Caleb was surprised to see a small crowd gathered on the front lawn. Jake was there, along with several neighbors, and, to Caleb's astonishment, Grant Hollis, Marcus Webb, and a handful of other bank employees. Welcome home, Lily, they shouted in ragged unison, and Lily's face split into the widest grin Caleb had ever seen. Daddy, they came for me! Caleb helped her out of the truck, and she was immediately surrounded by well-wishers offering hugs, flowers, and, from Jake, a gift-wrapped copy of what he promised was the best dragon book ever written. You didn't have to do this, Caleb told Grant, who was hanging back slightly from the crowd. Of course we did. This community takes care of its own. Grant's eyes were warm. Besides, I wanted to see for myself that she was really okay. That girl has a way of getting under your skin. Don't I know it? They moved the celebration inside, where someone had set up a spread of food that could have fed an army. Lily held court from the couch, accepting compliments and gifts with the grace of a seasoned diplomat, while Caleb circulated through the crowd, thanking everyone for coming. She looks good, Jake said, pulling Caleb aside. Better than I expected, honestly. She's a fighter, always has been. Takes after her father. Caleb shook his head. No, she takes after her mother. Sarah was the strong one. I'm just trying to live up to her example. The party went on for a few hours before Lily started to flag, her energy depleted by the excitement of the day. Caleb shooed everyone out with promises to keep them updated on her progress, and soon it was just the two of them again, alone in the quiet house. Daddy? Lily's voice was drowsy as he carried her to her room. That was the best welcome home party ever. It was pretty great, wasn't it? And Daddy? Yeah, sweetheart? I love our people. Caleb tucked her into bed, arranging her stuffed animals around her the way she liked. I love them too. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow's a new day. Is tomorrow the day we plan Disneyland? We'll see. Rest first, planning later. Fine. She was already half asleep, her words slurring together. But I'm holding you to it. Caleb stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching his daughter sleep. The monitors that had surrounded her in the hospital were gone now, replaced by the familiar comfort of her own room, her own things, her own life stretching out ahead of her. They'd made it. Against all odds, they'd made it. 2 days later, Grant Hollis called to invite Caleb to lunch. They met at a small restaurant downtown, the kind of place that had been serving the same menu since Caleb's grandfather was young. Grant was already seated when Caleb arrived, a cup of coffee cooling in front of him. "Thank you for coming," Grant said as Caleb slid into the booth across from him. "Thank you for everything you did during the surgery. Having you and the others there, it meant more than I can say. It was the least we could do." Grant took a sip of his coffee. "How's Lily?" "Better every day. She's already driving me crazy asking when we can go to Disneyland." Grant chuckled. "That's a good sign. Kids who nag are kids who are healing." He set down his cup and folded his hands on the table. "Caleb, I didn't ask you here just to check on Lily. I wanted to talk about the future. The bank. The bank. And more specifically, your role in it." Caleb leaned back in the booth. "I've been thinking about that a lot, about what I could actually contribute. And I keep coming back to what happened in that lobby. The way Vanessa looked at me, the assumptions she made. That doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It's a culture, a mindset. The whole institution is built on the idea that some people matter more than others based on their bank balance." Grant nodded slowly. "You're not wrong. We've lost our way over the years. What started as a community bank has become something cold and transactional. The board cares about profits, the managers care about metrics, and somewhere along the line we forgot that behind every account is a human being with a story. So how do we change that? That's what I want you to help me figure out." Grant pulled a folder from his briefcase and slid it across the table. "I've been doing some thinking myself about the values we've lost, the practices that need to change, the training we need to implement. But I need someone from outside the institution to tell me if I'm on the right track. Someone who understands what it feels like to be on the other side of the counter." Caleb opened the folder and began to read. Inside were proposals for new customer service training, revised policies for handling disputes, ideas for community outreach programs. It was comprehensive, thoughtful, and clearly the product of many sleepless nights. "This is impressive," Caleb said. But it's all top-down. It's about what the bank will do for customers. What I think is missing is the why." Grant leaned forward. "Go on." "When I was standing in that lobby, being judged by people who didn't know anything about me, what hurt wasn't the inconvenience. It wasn't even the rudeness. It was the feeling that I was invisible, that my dignity didn't matter because my appearance didn't match their expectations." Caleb tapped the folder. "You can train people to say the right things, follow the right procedures. But if they don't understand why every person deserves respect, really understand it in their bones, then it's just theater." Grant was quiet for a long moment. "How do we teach that?" "You can't teach it. You have to model it. You have to create an environment where treating people with dignity is the default, not the exception. And you have to hold people accountable when they fall short." Like Vanessa. Like Vanessa. Caleb closed the folder. "What happened to her, by the way? She started at the 5th Street branch, a month ago?" "Almost 6 weeks now. And I have to say, the reports have been interesting." "Interesting how?" Grant smiled slightly. "She's struggling. The customers at that branch don't care about her title or her suits. They care about whether she actually helps them. It's been a humbling experience for her." "Good. That's what she needs." "I agree. But here's the thing, Caleb. Humbling isn't the same as changing. I'm not sure if she's actually learning anything or if she's just waiting out her sentence so she can go back to her old ways." Caleb thought about that, about what it would take to turn someone like Vanessa into someone who genuinely cared about other people. It wasn't impossible. Sarah had believed that everyone had the capacity for change, but it wasn't easy either. "Maybe she needs to see a different example," he said slowly. "Not just be punished for her mistakes, but shown a better way of being." "What are you suggesting?" "I don't know yet, but let me think about it." They ordered lunch and continued talking, moving from the bank to broader topics. The state of the community, the legacy of Caleb's family, the responsibilities that came with wealth and influence. Grant shared stories about Caleb's father, about the projects they'd worked on together, about the vision Marcus Ward had for making Millbrook a place where everyone could thrive. "Your father used to say that money was just frozen time," Grant recalled. He said every dollar represented an hour of someone's life, and that wasting money was the same as wasting their lives. It changed how I thought about banking, about what we were really custodians of. I remember him saying that. Caleb smiled at the memory. He also said that the true measure of a man wasn't what he had, but what he gave away. Exactly. That's why I want you involved in this, Caleb. You carry that spirit. You understand what we've lost and what we need to find again. I'm just a carpenter. You're a ward. And in this town, that means something. It always has. After lunch, Caleb drove to the 5th Street branch of First Heritage Bank. He hadn't planned to come here, but something was pulling him, some instinct that said this was where he needed to be. The branch was smaller than the main location, tucked between a laundromat and a bodega in a neighborhood that had seen better days. The marble floors and crystal chandeliers of the flagship branch were nowhere to be found here. Instead, there were linoleum tiles, fluorescent lights, and a waiting area with plastic chairs that had seen decades of use. But there was something else here too. A warmth, an energy. The tellers were smiling, chatting with customers like they were neighbors rather than account numbers. An elderly woman was being helped to fill out a deposit slip by a young man who clearly had all the time in the world for her. And behind the counter, looking completely out of place in her designer suit and perfect hair, was Vanessa Park. Caleb watched her for a moment before she noticed him. She was helping a customer, a young mother with a crying baby in one arm and a toddler clinging to her leg. The old Vanessa would have looked at this woman with barely concealed disdain. But this Vanessa was different. There was something hesitant in her expression, something uncertain, like she was trying to figure out how to be a person she'd never learned to be. When she finally looked up and saw Caleb, her face went pale. "Mr. Ward." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Miss Park." He walked up to the counter. "I was in the neighborhood, thought I'd see how you were settling in." The young mother had moved aside, and now it was just the two of them, separated by a counter that felt like a much wider gulf. It's been an adjustment." Vanessa's hands were trembling slightly. "The customers here are different from what I'm used to." "Different how?" She hesitated, clearly weighing her words. "They don't care about my title. They don't care about my credentials. They just want to be helped." "And is that a problem?" "No." Her voice cracked. "No, it's actually a relief. In a strange way, I've spent my whole career trying to impress people, trying to climb the ladder, trying to prove I belonged in the rooms I was fighting to get into. Here, none of that matters. Here, I'm just another person behind a counter." Caleb studied her face, looking for signs of insincerity or calculation. He found none. What he found instead was exhaustion, confusion, and something that might have been the beginning of genuine self-reflection. "Can I ask you something, Ms. Park?" "Of course." "That day in the lobby, when you looked at me and my daughter, what did you see?" Vanessa closed her eyes. "I saw a problem, a disruption to the image I was trying to maintain. I saw someone who didn't fit, and my first instinct was to remove them." She opened her eyes, and they were glistening. "I didn't see a father. I didn't see a sick child. I didn't see human beings. I just saw obstacles. And now? What do you see now?" She looked around the branch at the customers, the tellers, the scuffed floors, and flickering lights. "I see people. I see stories I don't know, problems I can't assume I understand." Her gaze returned to Caleb. "I see how much I don't know, how much I got wrong." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "That's a start, Miss Park. That's a start." He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. "Mr. Ward, I know I don't have any right to ask this, but how is your daughter?" Caleb turned back. There was genuine concern in Vanessa's eyes, and he realized with surprise that he believed it. "She's recovering. The surgery was successful. She's home now, driving me crazy, asking about Disneyland." Something like relief crossed Vanessa's face. "I'm glad. I'm really glad. She seemed like a special girl." "She is." "Mr. Ward, Vanessa stopped, swallowed, started again. "I know that sorry doesn't begin to cover what I did, what I said, how I made you and your daughter feel. But I'm sorry. More sorry than I've ever been for anything in my life. Caleb looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had humiliated him, who had made his sick daughter feel unwelcome, who had represented everything wrong with a system that valued appearance over substance. He thought about what Sarah would do, what Sarah would say. Everyone deserves a chance to be better. Apology accepted, Ms. Park. He saw her shoulders sag with relief. But don't apologize to me. Apologize to the next person who walks through that door looking like they don't belong. Apologize by treating them like they matter. That's the only apology that counts. He walked out of the branch and into the afternoon sunlight, feeling something shift inside him. Not forgiveness exactly. That would take time. But understanding, maybe. A recognition that people were complicated, that change was possible, that even the worst of us carried the seeds of something better. Grant was right. The bank needed to change. But maybe so did Vanessa Park. And maybe, just maybe, those two things could happen together. When Caleb got home, Lily was sitting on the couch with a stack of Disneyland brochures spread out in front of her. Jake's wife had brought them over while Caleb was at lunch, and Lily had apparently memorized every ride, every restaurant, every character meet and greet opportunity. Daddy, did you know that Space Mountain has been there since 1977? That's older than you. Thanks for that reminder. And the churros. There are churro stands everywhere. We have to make a churro map. Caleb sat down beside her, looking at the colorful brochures that promised adventure and magic and happily ever after. A churro map, huh? It's strategic. We can't waste time looking for churros when we could be riding rides. That's very practical of you, Lily beamed. I know. I'm basically a genius. They spent the rest of the afternoon planning their hypothetical trip, which rides to prioritize, which shows to watch, which characters Lily absolutely had to meet. It was frivolous and fun and exactly what they both needed. That evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Caleb sat in the kitchen with his father's journal, flipping through pages of weathered handwriting. He found another passage, written decades ago but speaking directly to his present moment. A man came to me today, asking for help with a project his crew had abandoned. He'd been treated badly by the construction industry, dismissed because of his accent, his background, his lack of formal credentials. I could have turned him away too, would have been easier. But Thomas Ward didn't teach me to do what was easy. He taught me to do what was right. So I hired him, trained him, gave him a chance. And today, 20 years later, that man runs one of the most respected construction firms in the state. All because someone saw his potential when others only saw his limitations. Caleb closed the journal and stared at the wall, thinking about potential and limitations, about the people we dismiss and the people we elevate, about the choices that ripple outward through time in ways we can never fully predict. He thought about Vanessa Park, struggling behind that counter at the 5th Street branch. He thought about Grant Hollis, trying to restore humanity to an institution that had lost its way. He thought about Lily, planning her churro map with the confidence of someone who had stared down death and won. And he thought about himself, a carpenter, a father, a Ward, standing at a crossroads between the life he'd always known and something larger, something scarier, something that might just make a difference. The choice, when it came, felt less like a decision and more like an inevitability. He picked up his phone and dialed Grant's number. Caleb, is everything all right? Everything's fine. I just wanted to tell you something. What's that? Caleb took a deep breath. I'm in. Whatever you need, whatever it takes, I'm in. Let's change this bank. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for a long moment. Then Grant spoke, and his voice was thick with emotion. Your father would be proud, son. Your father would be so proud. I hope so. I really hope so. They talked for another hour, sketching out plans and possibilities, laying the groundwork for something new. By the time Caleb hung up, he was exhausted but energized, terrified but hopeful. Change was coming, and for the first time in his life, Caleb Ward was going to be the one driving it. The first meeting of the newly formed Community Values Committee took place 3 weeks after Caleb's phone call with Grant. They gathered in a conference room at the main branch of First Heritage Bank, around a table that had probably hosted 1,000 meetings about profits and projections and market share. But this meeting was different. This meeting was about something that couldn't be measured on a spreadsheet. Caleb sat at one end of the table, still feeling like an imposter in his button-down shirt and clean jeans. Grant sat at the other end, looking more energized than Caleb had ever seen him. Between them were 6 other people, carefully selected to represent different perspectives on what the bank could become. There was Marcus Webb, the young teller who had witnessed everything in the lobby that day and had been quietly advocating for change ever since. There was Elena Rodriguez, the branch manager from a working-class neighborhood on the east side of town who had spent 15 years fighting against the very culture they were now trying to dismantle. There was James Chen, a customer service trainer who had been developing new approaches that nobody in leadership had ever been willing to implement. There was Patricia Okonkwo, a loan officer who had seen too many qualified applicants turned away for reasons that had nothing to do with their creditworthiness. And there was one more person. Someone whose presence had surprised everyone in the room, including Caleb. Vanessa Park sat in the middle of the table, her usual designer suit replaced by something simpler, her perfect posture softened by an uncertainty that was new to her. She had been invited at Caleb's suggestion over Grant's initial objections. "She's the problem we're trying to solve," Grant had argued. "She's the example we need to transform," Caleb had countered. "If we can change her, we can change anyone. And if we can't change her, then all of this is just window dressing." Grant had reluctantly agreed, and now here they were, 7 people around a table, trying to figure out how to teach an institution to care. "Thank you all for being here," Grant began. "I know some of you are skeptical about whether real change is possible. I've been skeptical myself. But what happened in this lobby 2 months ago woke me up to something I should have seen years ago. We've built a bank that serves wealth, not people, and it's time to rebuild it from the ground up." He turned to Caleb. "Mr. Ward has agreed to lead this initiative. He brings a perspective that none of us inside the institution can offer, the perspective of someone who was failed by our systems." "Caleb?" Caleb cleared his throat, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on him. "I'm not a banker. I don't know anything about interest rates or investment portfolios or whatever else you all deal with every day. But I know what it feels like to be invisible. To walk into a place and have people decide you don't matter before you've even opened your mouth." He looked around the table, making eye contact with each person in turn. "That day in the lobby, I had $62 million in accounts at this bank, and I was treated like trash. But here's the thing. It would have been just as wrong if I'd had $62, or $6, or nothing at all." Patricia nodded vigorously. "I've seen it happen so many times. People come in needing help, and we make them feel like they're begging instead of banking. The training doesn't help," James added. "We teach procedures, not principles. People learn what to say, but they don't understand why they're saying it." Elena leaned forward. "And even when individual employees care, the incentive structure pushes them away from it. We're evaluated on transaction speed, upselling, account conversions. Nobody's ever been rewarded for spending an extra 10 minutes helping someone who wasn't going to make the bank money." "So we change the incentive structure," Caleb said. "We change what gets measured. We change what gets rewarded." "It's not that simple," Vanessa spoke for the first time, her voice quiet but steady. Everyone turned to look at her, and she flushed slightly under the attention. "I'm sorry. I know I'm probably the last person who should be talking, but I've been on the other side of this. I've been the one measuring those metrics, enforcing those policies. And I can tell you, even if you change the official incentives, the culture runs deeper than that." "How so?" Caleb asked, genuinely curious. Vanessa took a breath. "When I started in banking, I was young and idealistic. I wanted to help people. But the higher I climbed, the more I was rewarded for a certain kind of behavior, for protecting the brand, for catering to high-value clients, for making sure the lobby maintained a certain atmosphere." She looked down at her hands. "Nobody ever sat me down and told me to discriminate against people who looked poor. They didn't have to. The whole system taught me that some customers mattered more than others. And after a while, I stopped questioning it." The room was silent. Caleb studied Vanessa's face, looking for the woman who had sneered at him in the lobby. He found traces of her still, in the tension around her jaw and the defensive set of her shoulders. But there was something else there now, something that looked almost like shame. "So, how do we unteach it?" Marcus asked. How do we undo years of conditioning? You don't undo it, Caleb said slowly, an idea forming as he spoke. You replace it. You create new experiences that are more powerful than the old ones. You show people, don't just tell them, what it means to treat every person with dignity. Grant was nodding. Go on. Every person in this bank, from the CEO to the newest teller, should spend time at the Fifth Street branch. Caleb glanced at Vanessa. Not as punishment, but as education. Let them see what it's like to serve people who don't have fancy suits or impressive portfolios. Let them learn that those people have stories too, dreams too, deserve respect too. That could work, Elena said thoughtfully. But it would need to be more than just observation. They'd need to actually engage, build relationships, see the impact of their work on real lives. What about the customers themselves? Patricia suggested. What if we brought some of them into this process? Let them share their experiences, their frustrations, their ideas for how we could do better? James was scribbling notes furiously. We could redesign the whole training program around this. Make empathy the foundation, not an afterthought. Teach people to see the human first and the account second. The ideas flowed faster now, building on each other, taking shape into something that felt real and possible. They talked for 3 hours, working through objections and complications, finding solutions to problems they hadn't even known existed. By the time the meeting ended, they had the outline of a plan, not just a training program, but a complete cultural overhaul. New metrics that valued customer satisfaction over transaction speed. New hiring practices that screened for empathy as well as competence. New partnerships with community organizations. New ways of recognizing and rewarding employees who went above and beyond. And at the center of it all, a simple principle borrowed from Caleb's father. Every dollar represents an hour of someone's life. Every customer is a story we don't yet know. As the committee members filed out, Vanessa lingered behind. Caleb noticed and paused at the doorway. Ms. Park? Is there something you wanted to say? She approached him slowly, her usual confidence replaced by something more hesitant. I just wanted to thank you for including me in this. You didn't have to do that. No, I didn't. Then why did you? Caleb considered the question. Because change only matters if it reaches the people who need it most. And because my wife believed that everyone deserves a chance to become better than they've been. He paused. She was usually right about things like that. Your wife? She passed away. 2 years ago. I'm sorry, I didn't know. You couldn't have known. That's sort of the point. Caleb turned to face her fully. When you looked at me in that lobby, you saw work boots and a sick kid and decided I was nobody. But I'm somebody's son, somebody's father, somebody's husband, even if my wife is gone. We're all somebody to someone. That's the thing you missed. That's the thing I hope this committee can help you understand. Vanessa's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I'm trying. I really am trying. I know. Caleb nodded. That's why you're here. He walked out of the conference room and into the lobby where everything had started. The marble floors still gleamed, the crystal chandeliers still sparkled, but something felt different now. Lighter, maybe. More hopeful. Change was coming, and for the first time he believed it might actually stick. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. The Community Values Committee met twice a week, refining their plans and beginning to implement changes across the bank. Grant used his influence to get buy-in from the board, framing the initiative as both a moral imperative and a smart business strategy. Happy customers stay loyal, he argued at a board meeting that Caleb was invited to observe. Loyal customers bring in referrals. And in an age where one viral video can destroy a company's reputation, treating people with dignity isn't just good ethics, it's good business. The board approved a pilot program at 3 branches, including Fifth Street. James Chen threw himself into redesigning the training curriculum, bringing in speakers from community organizations, and even arranging for customers to share their stories directly with bank employees. Patricia worked on reforming the loan approval process, creating new pathways for qualified applicants who might have been overlooked under the old system. Elena led workshops on unconscious bias, drawing on her years of experience serving communities that the bank had historically marginalized. And Caleb found himself becoming something he'd never expected to be. a leader. It didn't come naturally. He was used to working with his hands, solving problems that had clear solutions. The work of cultural change was messier, more ambiguous. Progress was measured in small shifts rather than visible results. Some days it felt like they were moving mountains. Other days it felt like they were shoveling sand against the tide. But through it all, Lily kept him grounded. Her recovery continued to exceed expectations. Dr. Chen was amazed by her progress, attributing it to a combination of excellent surgical outcomes and what she called an unusually positive attitude. "Your daughter has decided she's going to get better," she told Caleb at a follow-up appointment. "And frankly, I've learned not to bet against patients like her." Lily threw herself into life with an energy that sometimes exhausted Caleb just to watch. She returned to school part-time, reconnected with friends, started physical therapy to rebuild the strength she'd lost during her illness. And she never let Caleb forget about Disneyland. "I've been doing research," she announced one evening, presenting him with a color-coded spreadsheet that Jake's wife had helped her create. "If we go in February, the lines will be shorter. And if we stay at this hotel, we can take a shuttle that drops us right at the entrance. Also, I've calculated the optimal churro-to-ride ratio for maximum enjoyment." Caleb studied the spreadsheet, genuinely impressed. "This is very thorough." "I know, I'm basically a project manager now." "Where did you learn the term project manager?" "Mr. Hollis told me that's what you are at the bank, so I looked it up." She beamed. "We're both project managers, Daddy, except my project is Disneyland and yours is making people be nicer." That's actually a pretty accurate summary. They settled on dates and began making reservations. Caleb found himself looking forward to the trip with an anticipation he hadn't felt about anything in years. It would be their first real vacation since Sarah died, their first chance to just be a family without the shadow of illness hanging over them. But before Disneyland, there was more work to do. The pilot program at 5th Street was yielding promising results. Customer satisfaction scores were up. Complaints were down. And something harder to measure but equally important was shifting. Employees were starting to talk differently about their work. Instead of complaining about difficult customers, they were sharing stories about meaningful interactions. Instead of rushing through transactions, they were taking time to connect. Vanessa, to everyone's surprise, had become one of the program's most dedicated participants. She volunteered for extra workshops, sought feedback from colleagues, and spent hours observing and learning from employees who had always had the empathy she was now trying to develop. One afternoon, Caleb stopped by the 5th Street branch and found her behind the counter, helping an elderly man fill out a complicated form. "Take your time, Mr. Patterson," she was saying. "There's no rush, and if you'd like, I can explain each section before you sign." The old man looked up at her with gratitude. "Thank you, dear. My eyes aren't what they used to be, and these forms are so confusing." "They really are. I've been pushing for us to simplify them, actually. Maybe you'd be willing to give us some feedback on what would make them easier to understand." Caleb watched, something warm spreading through his chest. This was the change they'd been working toward. Not grand gestures or dramatic transformations, but small moments of genuine human connection. One interaction at a time, one customer at a time, one employee at a time. When Vanessa finished with Mr. Patterson, she noticed Caleb watching and walked over, a mix of nervousness and determination on her face. "How was that?" "That was good, really good." She exhaled with relief. "I've been trying to do what you said, to see the person first. It's harder than I expected. I keep catching myself making assumptions, falling back into old patterns." "But you're catching yourself. That's the important part." Vanessa nodded slowly. "Can I ask you something? Something personal?" "You can ask. I can't promise I'll answer. That day when you asked Mr. Hollis not to fire me, when you asked for mercy." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Did you mean it? Or was it just a lesson for your daughter?" Caleb considered the question. "Both, I think. I wanted Lily to see that strength doesn't require cruelty. That power is best used to build up, not tear down." He met her eyes. "But I also believe that everyone deserves a chance to change, even people who've been cruel. Even people who've hurt us." "That's very generous." "It's what my wife would have wanted." She saw the best in people even when they couldn't see it in themselves. Caleb smiled slightly. "She would have liked you, actually. She had a thing for projects." Vanessa laughed, surprised. Is that what I am? A project? Aren't we all? Works in progress, trying to become better versions of ourselves? The branch door opened and a young woman entered with a toddler on her hip and a worried expression on her face. Vanessa glanced at her, then back at Caleb. Excuse me, I should go help her. Caleb watched her walk away, marveling at the transformation. The woman who had sneered at him 2 months ago was now rushing to assist someone who, under the old system, might have been dismissed as unimportant. Change was possible. Difficult, slow, imperfect, but possible. That evening, Caleb attended a special event at the main branch. Grant had organized a ceremony to formally launch the Community Values Initiative, inviting employees, customers, and community members to celebrate the beginning of what he called a new chapter in the bank's history. The lobby was transformed. Where there had been cold marble and unwelcoming splendor, there were now warm lights, comfortable seating areas, and displays showcasing the stories of customers and employees alike. One wall featured photographs of the bank's history, from its founding in 1892 to the present day, with a special section devoted to the workers who had built the original building, including Caleb's ancestors. Lily stood next to Caleb, wearing her best dress and holding his hand as they looked at the photos. That's great-great-great-grandpa Thomas, she said, pointing at a sepia-toned image of a man in work clothes, standing proudly in front of a half-completed building. That's him. He was about 30 when that was taken, just a few years before he started ward construction. He looked serious. He was serious, but Grandpa Marcus told me he had a great sense of humor too, used to play practical jokes on his workers all the time. Like what? Like one time, he convinced everyone that the foundation they'd just poured was crooked, made them all come back on a Sunday to check their measurements. When they showed up, they found a picnic waiting instead, complete with music and games. He said they worked so hard they deserved a party. Lily giggled. That's actually pretty funny. He understood something important, that work should be meaningful, but it should also be joyful. That you can ask people to give their best while still treating them like human beings. Grant approached them, looking distinguished in a suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, but wearing a smile that was entirely genuine. The wards, he said warmly. The guests of honor. We're not the guests of honor, Caleb protested. Of course you are. None of this would be happening without you. Grant bent down to Lily's level. And how are you feeling, young lady? Fully recovered? Mostly. Dr. Chen says I still need to take it easy sometimes, but I'm getting stronger every day. I can see that. You look wonderful. Lily beamed. Thank you. I like your tie. It has little ducks on it. Grant glanced down at his tie as if noticing it for the first time. So it does. It was a gift from my granddaughter. She said it would help me seem more approachable. Does it work? I'm not sure. You tell me. Lily studied him with exaggerated seriousness. I think you seem pretty approachable. The ducks help. Grant laughed, a deep, genuine sound that drew smiles from people nearby. High praise indeed. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go be approachable to some board members. Save me a seat at your table? There'll be one with your name on it. Oh! Grant squeezed Caleb's shoulder as he passed, a wordless acknowledgement of everything they'd built together over the past months. The ceremony was scheduled to begin in 15 minutes, and Caleb used the time to wander through the lobby, observing the mix of people who had gathered. He saw employees from every level of the organization, from senior executives to first-week tellers. He saw customers he recognized from the 5th Street branch, including Mr. Patterson and the young mother Vanessa had helped. He saw community leaders, local business owners, even a few city council members. And he saw something else, something that made his breath catch. In one corner of the lobby, away from the main crowd, Tyler stood with his mother, the boy from the hospital, the one Lily had befriended during her recovery. He looked healthier than the last time Caleb had seen him, his skin less pale, his movements more energetic. When he spotted Lily across the room, his face lit up with a smile that seemed to transform his whole being. Tyler. Lily broke away from Caleb and rushed toward her friend, pulling up short at the last moment to give him a careful hug that wouldn't jostle him too much. I didn't know you were coming, she said breathlessly. My mom got an invitation. She said it was from your dad? Lily turned to look at Caleb, who had followed her across the room. "You invited them?" Caleb shrugged. "I thought you might want your friend here, and Tyler's family is exactly the kind of customer this bank should be serving." Tyler's mother stepped forward. "Mr. Ward, I don't know how to thank you. When the invitation came, I thought it was a mistake. We're not the kind of people who get invited to things like this." "That's exactly why I invited you," Caleb said. "Every person in this room matters. Every person has a story worth hearing. That's what tonight is about, reminding everyone that this bank exists to serve the community, not the other way around." Tyler's mother blinked back tears. "After everything at the hospital, the bills, the stress, I was ready to give up. But then Lily came into Tyler's room, and she treated him like a regular kid, like he wasn't defined by his illness. It changed something in him, in both of us." Caleb felt his own eyes stinging. Kids have a way of doing that. They see past all the stuff that adults get hung up on. Lily and Tyler had already wandered off, deep in conversation about something that involved animated hand gestures and occasional bursts of laughter. Watching them, Caleb felt a surge of hope that was almost overwhelming. This was what it was all about. Not the money, not the bank, not even the grand ambitions of cultural change. Just people connecting with people, finding each other in the darkness, building bridges across all the divisions that kept them apart. The ceremony began, and Grant delivered a speech that was equal parts inspirational and practical. He talked about the bank's history, its failures, its potential. He introduced the Community Values Initiative and explained what it would mean for employees and customers alike. He acknowledged the incident that had started everything, without dwelling on it, turning it into a catalyst for positive change rather than a source of ongoing shame. When he finished, he invited Caleb to the podium. Caleb hadn't prepared anything. He wasn't a speechwriter or a public speaker. But as he looked out at the crowd, at the employees who were trying to change, at the customers who deserved better, at his daughter and her friend laughing together in the back of the room, the words came. "I'm a carpenter," he began. "I build things with my hands. And one thing I've learned in that work is that the strongest structures aren't the ones that look the most impressive. They're the ones with the best foundations." He let that sink in. 2 months ago, I walked into this lobby with my daughter. She was sick, tired, worn out from treatment. All I wanted was to check an account balance. Instead, I was made to feel like I didn't belong, like my presence was a contamination. The room was silent. Now, I could have walked away from that experience and never come back. I could have used the incident to humiliate the people who humiliated me. I had the power to do that, more power than they knew. He glanced at Vanessa, who was standing near the side of the room, her face unreadable. "But my wife taught me something. She taught me that the measure of a person isn't in how they treat people who can help them. It's in how they treat people who can't. It's easy to be kind to the powerful. It's harder to be kind to the invisible." He looked out at the crowd again. "Every person who walks through those doors is fighting a battle you know nothing about. They might be struggling to pay rent. They might be caring for a sick child. They might be grieving a loss that no one else can see. And when they come here, to this bank, they deserve to be treated with dignity. Not because of what's in their account, but because of what's in their heart." He paused, gathering himself. "My family helped build this city. My great-great-great-grandfather laid the foundation for this very building. And I believe that legacy carries a responsibility, not to tear down what's broken, but to rebuild it, to make it better. To ensure that the next person who walks through those doors in work boots and a sick kid never feels the way I felt." He stepped back from the podium. "That's the foundation I want to build. That's the change I want to see. And I hope you'll all help me make it happen." The applause that followed was thunderous. People rose to their feet. Someone was crying. Someone else was cheering. Caleb made his way back to Lily, who threw her arms around him. "That was amazing, Daddy." "You think so?" "I know so. Mommy would have been so proud." Caleb held his daughter close, feeling the warmth of her embrace, the steady beat of her healing heart. Somewhere in the crowd, he saw Vanessa wiping her eyes. Somewhere else, Grant was beaming like a proud grandfather. And somewhere deep inside himself, in the place where Sarah's memory lived, Caleb felt something settle into peace. They were building something new, something meaningful. And it was only the beginning. The months that followed the ceremony unfolded like the slow turning of seasons, each day bringing small changes that accumulated into something larger than anyone had anticipated. The Community Values Initiative spread from the 3 pilot branches to every location in the First Heritage Network. Employee satisfaction surveys showed dramatic improvements. Customer complaints dropped by 60%. And most importantly, the stories began to change. Where once there had been tales of dismissal and humiliation, now there were stories of connection and compassion. A teller who had stayed an hour past closing to help a widow understand her late husband's accounts. A loan officer who had found creative solutions for a small business owner on the verge of bankruptcy. A branch manager who had personally driven an elderly customer home when she realized the woman had no way to get there safely. These were the ripples Caleb had hoped for, spreading outward from that single moment in the lobby, touching lives he would never know about. But the biggest change was happening closer to home. February arrived with unseasonably warm weather, and Caleb found himself loading suitcases into the back of his truck while Lily bounced impatiently on the front porch. "Daddy, the plane leaves in 4 hours. We need to go now." "We have plenty of time, sweetheart." "But what if there's traffic? What if there's a problem at the airport? What if the plane leaves early?" "Planes don't leave early." "How do you know? Have you ever been on a plane?" Caleb laughed. He hadn't, actually. The Ward family had always been more the road trip type. But for Disneyland, for Lily, for this trip that represented so much more than just a vacation, he had decided to do things differently. "I know, because that's not how airlines work. Now help me with this last bag." They drove to the airport with the windows down, letting the warm breeze wash over them. Lily had her churro map spread across her lap, reviewing the optimal route one more time. "Okay, so first we hit Space Mountain because the line is shortest in the morning. Then we work our way through Tomorrowland, grab a churro at the stand near the Matterhorn, and then—" "Lily, what?" "We're going to have fun. That's the only plan we need." She looked at him like he'd suggested they skip Disneyland entirely. "Daddy, having a plan is how we maximize fun. This is basic optimization." "Where did you learn the word optimization?" "Mr. Chen's training materials. He left some at our house after the last committee meeting." Caleb shook his head, marveling at the strange education his daughter was receiving. Part hospital patient, part project manager, part business consultant. She was going to be a force of nature when she grew up. If she grew up. The thought came unbidden, a shadow from the dark days that sometimes still crept into his mind. He pushed it away. Dr. Chen's latest report had been unequivocal. Lily's recovery was complete. Her heart was functioning normally. There was no reason to expect any complications. She was going to grow up. She was going to have a full, rich, beautiful life. And right now, she was going to experience the magic of Disneyland. The flight was uneventful, though Lily spent the entire 3 hours with her face pressed to the window, gasping at clouds and asking questions about how airplanes stayed in the sky. Caleb did his best to explain, drawing on half-remembered physics lessons and a lot of creative improvisation. "So the wings push the air down and the air pushes the wings up?" Something like that. "That seems like it shouldn't work. And yet here we are, 30,000 feet in the air." Lily considered this. "I guess sometimes things that seem impossible actually aren't." Caleb looked at his daughter, this miracle who had survived against the odds, who had taught him more about courage and hope than anyone else in his life, and felt his throat tighten. "Yeah," he said softly, "I guess they aren't." They landed in California to sunshine and palm trees and air that smelled different from home. Lily practically vibrated with excitement as they collected their bags and made their way to the rental car. "Daddy, we're really here. We're really in California. This is where Disneyland is." "I know, sweetheart. I helped plan the trip, remember? But now it's real. Before it was just plans and dreams, but now it's real." She said the word real like it was the most magical concept in the universe. And maybe it was. For a little girl who had spent years dreaming of this moment while hooked up to machines in hospital rooms, the reality of actually being here was probably overwhelming. They checked into the hotel, a modest place that Lily had selected because it had a pool shaped like Mickey Mouse's head, and spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the area around the park. Lily wanted to save Disneyland itself for the next day, when they could devote their full attention to the churro map and the carefully optimized route. That evening, They had dinner at a restaurant where the waiters sang, and the food came with sparklers, and Lily laughed so hard that Caleb thought his heart might burst with joy. "Daddy?" "Yeah, sweetheart?" "Thank you for bringing me here, for keeping your promise. A ward never breaks a promise." "I know." She smiled, and in that smile Caleb saw Sarah, her warmth, her kindness, her unshakable belief that the world could be good. "I'm really glad I'm a ward." "Me too, honey. Me too." The next 3 days were everything Caleb had hoped for and more. They rode every ride Lily could handle, ate more churros than any two people should reasonably consume, and met characters whose costumes probably cost more than Caleb's truck. Lily got a princess makeover at a salon that transformed her into a glittering vision of childhood joy. She hugged Mickey Mouse for so long that the handler had to gently suggest they move along to give other children a turn. And through it all, she laughed. She laughed, and she smiled. And she lived in a way that Caleb had feared he might never see again. On their last night in California, they sat on the hotel balcony, watching fireworks light up the sky over the park. "Daddy?" "I've been thinking about something." "What's that?" Lily was quiet for a moment, her face illuminated by the colors exploding overhead. "When I was really sick, I used to pray that I would get better. But I wasn't praying to get better so I could go to Disneyland or eat ice cream or do fun things." "What were you praying for?" "More time with you." She turned to look at him, her eyes bright with reflected fireworks. "I just wanted more time. That's all. Everything else is just extra." Caleb pulled her close, holding her against his chest as the fireworks continued to burst across the sky. He didn't trust himself to speak. He just held her, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the warmth of her small body, marveling at the miracle of her existence. "I love you, Daddy," she whispered. "I love you too, sweetheart, more than anything in the world." They sat there until the last firework faded, until the sky went dark, until Lily's breathing evened out and he realized she had fallen asleep in his arms. He carried her to bed, tucked her in, and stood watching her sleep for a long time. This was what mattered. Not the bank, not the money, not the grand ambitions of social change. This, his daughter, alive and well, and dreaming of churros. Everything else was just extra. They returned to Millbrook to find spring beginning to push through the last remnants of winter. Crocuses were blooming in the garden, and the trees were starting to show the first hints of green. The world was waking up, and so was the town. Caleb dove back into his work at the bank with renewed energy. The Community Values Initiative was entering its second phase, expanding beyond customer service to address lending practices, hiring policies, and community investment. Grant had secured funding for a new project that Caleb was particularly excited about, a community center that would be built on the east side of town in a neighborhood that had been underserved for generations. "We're going to name it the Marcus Ward Community Center," Grant told Caleb one afternoon, spreading architectural plans across the conference table. "After your father. If you approve, of course." Caleb stared at the plans, his throat tight. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. Your father spent his life building things that would outlast him. This center will carry on that legacy, a place where people can gather, learn, connect, where everyone is welcome, regardless of their background." "He would have loved that." "I know." Grant smiled. "That's why I'm doing it." The groundbreaking ceremony was scheduled for late March, and the whole town seemed to turn out for the occasion. Caleb stood at the front of the crowd with Lily, watching as community leaders, bank executives, and ordinary citizens gathered to mark the beginning of something new. Grant gave a speech about the history of the Ward family and their contributions to Millbrook. Elena Rodriguez spoke about what the center would mean for the neighborhood where she'd grown up. James Chen presented the plans for the educational programs that would be offered once the building was complete. And then it was Caleb's turn. He stepped up to the podium, looking out at the sea of faces. He saw Jake and his wife, neighbors who had supported him through everything. He saw Marcus Webb and Patricia Okonkwo and other members of the committee who had helped turn his ideas into reality. He saw Tyler and his mother standing in the back, both of them looking healthier than they had a year ago. And he saw Vanessa Park. She was standing near the edge of the crowd wearing a simple dress instead of her usual designer suit. Her hair was down, softening her features. And she was smiling, a real smile, not the thin professional expression she used to wear like armor. When their eyes met, she nodded slightly, and Caleb nodded back. "A year ago," he began, "I walked into a bank with my daughter and was told I didn't belong. That experience changed my life. It could have filled me with bitterness. It could have made me cynical about people and institutions and the possibility of change." He paused, looking at Lily, who was beaming up at him from the front row. But something different happened instead. Because of the people in this crowd, because of their willingness to listen, to learn, to try, that moment of pain became the seed of something beautiful. Today, we're breaking ground on a building that will serve this community for generations, a building named for my father, who taught me that the true measure of a man isn't what he accumulates, but what he gives away. Caleb picked up the ceremonial shovel that had been placed beside the podium. "My father used to say that every building starts with a single shovel of dirt, a single act of faith that something can be built, something can grow, something can change." He looked out at the crowd one more time. "This is our shovel of dirt. This is our act of faith. And I believe, I truly believe, that what we're building here will change lives." He drove the shovel into the earth, and the crowd erupted in applause. Afterward, there was a reception in a tent near the construction site. Caleb circulated through the crowd, accepting congratulations and answering questions about the project. Lily had found Tyler, and the two of them were running around the edges of the gathering, playing some kind of game that involved a lot of laughing and the occasional dramatic fall. "They look happy." Caleb turned to find Vanessa standing beside him, a cup of punch in her hand. "They do," he agreed. "Kids bounce back faster than adults." "Don't they just—" She was quiet for a moment, watching the children play. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, that day in my office at 5th Street, about apologizing through actions, not words. And I've been trying, really trying, not just to be nicer to customers, but to understand them, to see them as people instead of transactions." She turned to face him. "It's harder than I expected, but it's also more rewarding than I expected. That's how change works. It's hard until it isn't, and then you wonder why you ever did things the old way." Vanessa nodded slowly. "I want to thank you for everything, for the mercy you showed me, for the chance you gave me. I know I didn't deserve it." "Maybe not, but deserve is a complicated concept." Caleb looked out at the crowd, at all the people who had gathered to celebrate something good. "My wife used to say that we're all works in progress, that the only real sin is refusing to grow." She sounds like she was a wise woman. She was. I miss her every day. He smiled slightly. But I think she'd be happy with how things have turned out. She always believed that people could change. She'd be glad to see the proof. Vanessa followed his gaze, taking in the scene, the celebration, the construction site, the future taking shape in the dirt. "This is really happening, isn't it? The bank, the community center, the whole initiative. It's not just talk. It's not just talk. What's next?" Caleb considered the question. "More of the same, I hope. More building, more connecting, more helping people see each other as human beings." He paused. "Grant wants me to join the board." Vanessa's eyebrows rose. "The board of directors?" "Yeah, he says the institution needs voices like mine, voices that remember what it's like to be overlooked." "What did you say?" "I said I'd think about it." Caleb watched Lily tackle Tyler in the grass, both of them dissolving into giggles. "I'm still a carpenter at heart. Big conference rooms and fancy titles don't come naturally to me." "Maybe that's exactly why you should do it." "Maybe." He turned back to Vanessa. "What about you? What's next?" She took a deep breath. "Grant offered me a new position, Director of Community Relations. It would mean overseeing all the outreach programs, the new initiatives, the connections with organizations like the one building this center." "That's a big job." It's a different job. Less about managing transactions and more about managing relationships. Less about protecting the brand and more about building trust." She smiled, and there was something almost peaceful in her expression. "It's what I should have been doing all along, I think, if I hadn't gotten so lost in the climb." "Will you take it?" "I think so." "Yes." She nodded, as if confirming it to herself. Yes, I'll take it. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the party continue around them. It was strange, Caleb reflected, how people who started as enemies could end up as something like allies. Not friends exactly, he wasn't sure they'd ever be friends, but fellow travelers on the same road. Grant appeared at Caleb's elbow, his face flushed with excitement. There you are. I need to steal you for a moment. The mayor wants to discuss something about the center. Caleb nodded and followed Grant toward a cluster of officials near the refreshment table. As he walked away, he heard Vanessa call out behind him. Caleb? He turned. Thank you for everything, really. He nodded once, then continued on his way, feeling something settle into place inside him. Some final piece of the puzzle clicking into position. The mayor wanted to discuss naming opportunities and ribbon-cutting ceremonies and all the ceremonial trappings that came with public projects. Caleb listened politely, offered input where appropriate, and let Grant handle the politics. His mind kept drifting to other things, to Lily playing in the grass, to Sarah watching from wherever she was, to the future stretching out before them like an uncharted road. By the time the reception wound down, the sun was setting over Millbrook, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded Caleb of the first time he'd brought Lily to see the autumn leaves. They'd been in the thick of her treatment then, uncertain of what the future held. Now here they were, on the other side, watching a new chapter begin. Daddy? Lily tugged at his hand. Can we go home? I'm tired. Of course, sweetheart. They said their goodbyes, collected Tyler and his mother for the ride back to their neighborhood, and piled into Caleb's truck. The old vehicle still looked out of place among the newer cars in the parking lot, but Caleb had stopped caring about that a long time ago. Mr. Ward? Tyler's voice came from the back seat. Can Lily come over this weekend? I got a new dragon book and she hasn't read it yet. What do you think, Lily? I think yes, obviously. Then yes, obviously. They dropped Tyler and his mother at their apartment, exchanging promises to coordinate the weekend plans. Then it was just Caleb and Lily driving through the darkening streets toward home. Daddy? Yeah, sweetheart? Today was a good day. It really was. And you know what I was thinking? What's that? Lily was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was serious in that way that sometimes surprised him. I was thinking about how everything started because of something bad, that lady being mean to us at the bank, but then all these good things happened because of it. The community center, the changes at the bank, all those people learning to be nicer. That's a pretty deep observation. I know, I'm basically a philosopher now. Caleb laughed. Is that so? It is. And my philosophy is this. Bad things happen, but they don't have to stay bad. You can turn them into something good if you try hard enough. She paused. Mommy would have said that, right? She would have said exactly that. I thought so. Lily settled back in her seat, satisfied. I'm glad we're wards. I'm glad we build things. They pulled into the driveway of their modest house, the porch light glowing warm against the darkness. As Caleb helped Lily out of the truck, he took a moment to look up at the stars just beginning to appear in the evening sky. Sarah was up there somewhere. He didn't know if he believed in heaven or an afterlife or any of the things that people used to comfort themselves in the face of loss, but he believed in her spirit, her legacy, her influence on the person he was still becoming. I did it, he whispered to the stars. I kept my promise. I took care of her. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of spring and new beginnings. Inside the house, Lily was already getting ready for bed, her voice carrying down the hallway as she narrated her nighttime routine to no one in particular. Caleb stood in the doorway of the kitchen, listening to her chatter, feeling a peace that had been hard-won and was all the more precious for it. His phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Grant. Board meeting next week. We're voting on your nomination. I hope you'll say yes. Caleb looked at the message for a long time. Then he typed a response. I'll be there. He set the phone down and went to tuck Lily into bed. She was already under the covers, her dragon book open beside her, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. Story? She asked hopefully. One story, then sleep. One long story. One medium story. Deal. He sat on the edge of her bed and began to tell her about her great-great-great-grandfather Thomas, about the ships that had brought him across the ocean, about the dreams he'd carried in his heart. He told her about the first building Thomas had worked on, the first dollar he'd saved, the first foundation he'd laid with his own 2 hands. And that foundation, Caleb said, is still standing today. The building on top of it has changed 100 times, but the foundation is the same, because Thomas understood something important. He understood that when you build something right, it lasts. Not just for years or decades, but for generations. Lily's eyes were closing, but she was still listening. Like our family. Exactly like our family. We're built on a foundation of love and hard work and caring about other people, and that foundation is going to last forever. Promise? Caleb leaned down and kissed her forehead. Promise. She was asleep within minutes, her breathing even and peaceful. Caleb stayed beside her for a long time, watching the rise and fall of her chest, marveling at the miracle of her existence. Then he stood, turned off the light, and went to sit on the porch swing that Sarah had loved so much. The night was quiet, the stars bright overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a dog was barking. Somewhere else, a car engine hummed along a street that ward hands had helped pave a century ago. Caleb thought about everything that had happened, the humiliation in the bank lobby, the surgery that had saved his daughter's life, the changes that were transforming an institution and a community. He thought about the community center being built in his father's name, the board seat waiting for him, the future unfolding in ways he never could have predicted. And he thought about Sarah, who had started all of this by teaching him that everyone deserves kindness, that strength is found in mercy, that the true measure of a person is how they treat people who can do nothing for them. We did it, he said to the empty swing beside him, the place where Sarah used to sit. We really did it. The wind picked up slightly, carrying the sweet smell of the flowering trees in the yard, and Caleb Ward sat alone on his porch, watching the stars, knowing that his daughter was safe, his family's legacy was secure, and the world was just a little bit better than it had been before. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to build, to grow, to help. But tonight, he was content. Tonight, he was home. The morning of the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Marcus Ward Community Center dawned bright and clear, 6 months after the groundbreaking. The building had gone up faster than anyone expected, thanks to an army of volunteers and a community that had embraced the project as their own. Caleb stood in front of the finished structure, taking in the clean lines and welcoming facade. It was modest compared to some community centers, no marble floors or crystal chandeliers here, but it was built to last, built to serve, built on the same principles that had guided the Ward family for 5 generations. It's beautiful, Daddy. Lily stood beside him, wearing a dress that Sarah had bought for her years ago, finally big enough to fit. Grandpa would have loved it. He really would have. The crowd gathered slowly, filling the plaza in front of the center. Caleb recognized faces from every chapter of the journey. Grant Hollis, looking frail but proud. Vanessa Park, standing with her new community relations team. Marcus Webb and the other committee members, who had turned ideas into reality. Tyler and his mother, who had become regular fixtures in Lily's life. Jake and his wife, neighbors who had become family, and so many others. People from the neighborhood where the center would serve, employees from every branch of First Heritage Bank, community leaders, local business owners, ordinary citizens who had heard the story and wanted to be part of it. When it was time for the ceremony to begin, Grant stepped up to the microphone. 1 year ago, he said, a man walked into our bank with his daughter, and we failed him. We judged him by his appearance, dismissed him because he didn't match our expectations, tried to make him feel unwelcome in a place that should have welcomed everyone. The crowd was silent, listening. That failure became a gift, not because the wrong we did was somehow acceptable, but because it forced us to look at ourselves honestly, to see the gap between the values we claimed and the values we practiced, to begin the hard work of closing that gap. Grant turned to look at the building behind him. This center is the physical embodiment of that work. But it's only one piece of a larger transformation, a transformation in how we treat each other, how we see each other, how we build a community where everyone belongs. He gestured for Caleb to join him at the microphone. Caleb Ward has been the conscience of this initiative from the beginning. He could have sought revenge for what happened to him and his daughter. Instead, he sought redemption, not just for himself, but for all of us. He reminded us that the true measure of an institution isn't its balance sheet, but its heart. Grant handed Caleb a pair of oversized scissors. It is my honor to invite Caleb to cut the ribbon and officially open the Marcus Ward Community Center. Caleb took the scissors, feeling their weight in his hands. He looked at Lily, who was giving him 2 thumbs up. He looked at the building that bore his father's name. He looked at the crowd of people who had gathered to witness this moment. And he cut the ribbon. The crowd erupted in cheers. Music started playing from speakers set up around the plaza. People began streaming into the building to explore the classrooms, the gathering spaces, the community kitchen that would serve meals to anyone who needed them. Caleb stayed outside for a moment, letting the noise wash over him. He felt a hand slip into Lily's hand, warm and small and strong. "We did it, Daddy." "We did. Mommy would be so proud. I think she would too." They stood there together, father and daughter, watching the community center come alive with people. Children were already racing through the hallways, their laughter echoing off the walls. Adults were examining the bulletin boards, signing up for programs, making connections with neighbors they'd never met. This was the legacy they were building. Not just a building, but a community. Not just an institution, but a family. And it had all started with a single act of mercy in a marble lobby, when a man in work boots chose kindness over revenge and taught his daughter that real strength meant lifting others up instead of putting them down. "Daddy?" "Yeah, sweetheart? Can we get ice cream after this?" Caleb laughed, pulling her close. "Absolutely, the biggest sundae they've got." "With 2 cherries?" "With 2 cherries." They walked into the community center together, joining the celebration, becoming part of something larger than themselves. The noise and the joy and the hope surrounded them, carrying them forward into a future they were building together. One moment at a time, one act of kindness at a time, one day at a time. And somewhere, watching over them, Sarah Ward smiled. Her family was going to be okay. They were more than okay. They were home.